On a beautiful night at Shinya County Yeong Manor, a noble race physician sighed after examining a baby's condition. He assessed that the child would likely not live past 20 years old due to his congenital constitution, viewing it as a divine punishment. The father believed that not only was the child born with such a constitution, but his very birth had caused his mother's death. The physician felt saddened by young Dame Yeong, the Yeong Manor patriarch, making such a declaration. The physician explained that this situation was akin to the 9 severed meridians. He had never encountered anyone with their Baihui acupoint so severely opened. Referred to as the acupoint in the head, it indicated that the child would die at the age of 20. People typically called this phenomenon deity ascension, a practice performed by extremely powerful Taoists when they departed for the heavenly realm. The physician dismissed this notion as nonsense, mentioning old rumors about absolute martial masters using the upper meridian of their heads, specifically the Baihui acupoint. According to these rumors, deity ascension occurred when someone became overly intoxicated by the energy of the great nature from heavens and earth, leading to death due to inability to withstand it. A sense of disdain appeared on Dame Yeong's face as he looked at his son. He hurriedly stood up, convinced it was heavenly punishment, and ignored the child. The physician was angered by the father's harsh words towards an innocent baby. Dame Yeong instructed him to leave, promising his pay through the chief steward. In response, the physician hastily exited the manor, claiming he did not need the payment. He murmured to himself that if the child had been raised in the unorthodox sects or demonic faction, he might have become the heavenly demon. Had he grown up in the Shaolin Temple, he could have mastered the temple's 72 elite training methods twice over. Yet, the child was born as a hated figure in such a place. The physician knew the child would die young in the countryside without means of survival unless he achieved enlightenment on his own. 15 years later at Yeong Manor, the Yeong family gathered around the table. Dame Yeong announced that since his deceased father, a disciple of the Jeongnan Sect Jeongja, founded the clan, he had devoted his life to reviving it. If the clan gained fame worldwide, he would inherit the ultimate technique of the Jeongnan Sect. He toasted to his son, who had followed in his deceased father's footsteps and successfully joined the Jeongnan Sect. The siblings congratulated their brother on his achievement before Dame Yeong asked everyone to raise their glasses for a toast. The eldest noticed the empty seat at the table and called out to his father, pointing out that Yeonshin was not present. Dame Yeong explained that he had instructed Yeonshin to remain at the training ground. The eldest attempted to protest, but was refused. His father argued that Yeonshin's absence was better for the joyous occasion, as his presence would only bring ill omens. In the training room, Yeonshin diligently cultivated alone. Throughout his life, shunned by his family, he focused solely on finding a way to live longer than his constitution allowed. Suddenly, inner energy surged through his body. Afterward, he felt stronger, with sharper sight and a clearer mind. This improvement was due to his complete mastery of the Jeong Clan's dynamic art, a technique that allowed him to stimulate his muscles with energy and compress it. Currently, he could not enhance it further. Yet, he questioned whether a stronger body would enable him to live longer. Reflecting on the technique, Yeonshin recalled approaching his elder brother to share the new technique he had created, a redeveloped form of the clan's exclusive martial art. The brother had been surprised and then scolded Yeonshin, demanding he never disclose it to anyone. Feeling dejected, Yeonshin turned to another brother, who also refused to learn the technique out of fear of energy deviation. When word reached their father, Dame Yeong was furious. He was angered by his son's audacity to tamper with the clan's technique, especially since Yeonshin was not a clan founder. As a result, Yeonshin faced further shunning from his family and was scolded by everyone with hate and discontent. In the end, Yeonshin pondered the role of a clan founder, someone who creates martial arts and establishes a martial group. He had never considered himself such. His focus had been solely on becoming healthy and living harmoniously with others. Coincidentally, people were gathering that day because an important guest was about to arrive. Upon noticing this, Yeonshin remembered the impending visitation of the martial masters of the Jeongnan Sect, one of the 9 great sects in the world, and one of the Twin Walls known as the strongest groups in Shaanxi, alongside the Manhwa sect. Yeonshin thought of them as the deities of sword and desired to meet them in person. However, a few nights prior, the chief steward had informed Yeonshin that he was forbidden to appear before the important guests, as per his father's orders, due to Yeonshin's role in his mother's death. The chief steward apologized before leaving Yeonshin confused. He desired to see the masters, but was forbidden by his father. Eventually, he decided that observing them from afar might suffice, believing he could learn from such skilled masters. Members of the Jeong Clan gathered at the entrance to welcome the esteemed guests, including Daemyeong, amid murmurs from the people wondering about the visitors. When the time arrived, it was announced that the martial masters of the Jeongnan sect had arrived. A woman in a peach-colored robe led the masters. As she entered the Jeong family courtyard, the people inside were surprised to learn that their esteemed guests were of the noble race. Yeonshin was particularly astonished to see her, as the noble race was known in books as a mysterious, immortal race that humans regarded as deities. He noticed the unique energy surrounding her, the core energy condensed within her body and emanating naturally. Meanwhile, Daemyeong nervously welcomed her. She greeted them politely, expressing gratitude for their warm welcome and hospitality. Introducing herself as Yeonshin, an elder of the Jeongnan sect, Daemyeong was shocked upon learning that she held the position of an elder. He immediately bowed along with everyone, seeking forgiveness for failing to recognize such a person. Yeonshin requested that they lift their heads, explaining that her presence was not meant to boast of her status. In response, Daemyeong quickly invited the guests to enter. Meanwhile, Yeonshin, observing Yeonshin's noble demeanor and elder status, wondered about her longevity. Shortly after, Yeonshin leisurely walked toward the pavilion, accompanied by Daemyeong and his child, excluding Yeonshin, who watched from the crowd. Unexpectedly, Yeonshin turned her gaze toward Yeonshin. Noticing her look, Yeonshin brought his hands together in greeting, just as Daemyeong pointed out to her that Yeonshin was his third son. As Yeonshin departed the gathering, she remarked on the brightness of his eyes and his intelligence. Hearing this, Daemyeong countered by stating that the child was not well-mannered, which confused Yeonshin. He further added that Yeonshin was an embarrassment to the family for always causing trouble. Meanwhile, Yeonshin returned to the training room to pick up a sword. He had gained a new perspective after observing the energies of the Jeongnan sect's martial masters. Having nowhere else to turn after training in the Jeong Clan's movement art, he contemplated his next area of training. On a whim, he decided to begin training with swords. After the welcome greetings concluded, the martial masters entered their lodging. One of them thought the place exceeded his expectations, noting that the abundance of earth energy would attract the Tyrant Sword tribe. Yeonshin believed they would come to this location, making it an ideal spot to plan a counterattack. Unfortunately, this would likely lead to the Jeong Clan's sacrifice. One master suggested attacking and destroying them before they breached the walls. Yeonshin considered this a potentially great idea, though she noted the Tyrant Sword tribe, known as the most troublesome group within the 13 Skies, posed significant challenges. She decided to wait, instructing her subordinates to remain vigilant and keep their sword auras sharp at all times. Additionally, Yeonshin found herself thinking about Yeonshin, as he clearly stood out among the Jeong Clan members, leading her to consider him a strange child. As night fell, Yeonshin diligently cultivated in the training room. It was the first time he realized his Baihui acupoint was more open than others. Although he hadn't meditated for a year, focusing instead on training his body through the Jeong dynamic technique, the energy flowing through his head had intensified. Horror filled his mind as he understood that, at this rate, he had less than 5 years before he would lose consciousness. This was his reality, living on borrowed time with only 5 years left to live. Uncertain and scared, he left the training room to clear his mind. Despite having fully mastered the Jeong dynamic technique, he knew he couldn't prevent his impending death in 5 years. Suddenly, he sensed something was wrong. An ominous energy emanated from the side court. Instinctively, he rushed toward it, recognizing that something was amiss. The closer he approached, the stronger the scent of blood became. The night was unusually quiet, too still for any bloodshed to occur. Upon examining the gate, Yeonshin discovered a trap formation. Without hesitation, he entered through the gate to locate the massacred servants. During his cultivation, he had not realized that such an event was unfolding within Jeong Manor. He concluded that the trap formation was responsible. As Yeonshin surveyed the dead, he noticed that all the victims were from the Jeong Clan, leading him to suspect that the culprits possessed formidable martial prowess. After a brief search, a bald brute emerged, insulting Yeonshin for his foolishness. The brute suggested that if Yeonshin had managed to survive, he should have remained hidden instead of emerging. Another culprit inferred that Yeonshin had little time left and instructed the bald brute to send him to the afterlife. The bald brute claimed he was merely following orders, urging Yeonshin not to hold him accountable. The bald brute concentrated his inner energy to crush Yeonshin, but the frail-looking boy effortlessly grabbed his hand, halting his attack. Yeonshin then crushed the brute's hand with his bare hand, causing the bald man to scream in agony as his arm bone broke under the boy's strength. Emotionlessly, Yeonshin assessed the remaining culprits and brushed the injured brute aside. The leader of the culprits wondered about Yeonshin's identity. After gathering his inner energy, Yeonshin revealed that he was the third son of the household, ignoring the bald brute. He stepped forward with murderous intent. The brute rose, cursing the frail-looking boy who had broken his hand, and attempted another attack with his other hand. Before he could land a blow, Yeonshin had already swung his sword, decapitating the brute in an instant. Without delay, Yeonshin advanced to strike any remaining attackers, swiftly eliminating another culprit who could not respond in time. Utilizing his unique technique, the Scripture of Jung dynamic technique, Yeonshin dodged incoming attacks flawlessly and launched his own counterattacks. With killing intent and fierce determination in his eyes, Yeonshin moved from one opponent to the next. Like those before them, the culprits were powerless against the seemingly frail boy. Approaching two more individuals, Yeonshin beheaded one and swiftly pushed the other back before stabbing him in the heart without missing his sole opportunity to attack. One by one, the culprits fell with each decisive sword strike. Despite his youth, Yeonshin's every move was marked by unwavering determination to kill without hesitation. After avenging the sins committed against his clan, Yeonshin felt satisfied that, even though it was his first time training with the delightful sword, he had mastered its use. Suddenly, another group appeared. The leader of this group, a brute, asserted that they would easily handle the frail-looking boy before them, confident they would not let their guard down. Faced with such brutality, Yeonshin remained calm, displaying no trace of anger as he continued to listen. The brute remarked on how surprising it was for a child to wield the delightful sword and speculated whether Yeonshin had trained with it his entire life. Instead of responding, Yeonshin inquired if they were from the Blood Flame cult. It became clear that the first group he had eliminated belonged to the Blood Flame cult, while the newly arrived group hailed from the Tyrant Sword tribe. The 13 Skies were renowned as the most ruthless and powerful factions in all of Murim. The brute refused to answer when Yeonshin inquired about the presence of two organizations from the 13 Skies. Observing their inaction, Yeonshin deduced that they weren't aware of his affiliation with the Desolate Fortress, the premier branch sect in Murim. Consequently, he suggested that killing him would be troublesome, even for members of the Tyrant Sword tribe. Without warning, a massive aura sword attack swept through the yard, catching Yeonshin off guard. He observed that the individual struck by the attack was one of the masters from the Jonan sect. Shortly thereafter, Yeonshin arrived, noticing the frail-looking boy as she dodged the incoming attack. Known as the deity of the sword, her disheveled state indicated that her opponent had been formidable. A chill ran down Yeonshin's spine as another person joined the battle, hovering in the air. The ominous energy emanating from this newcomer left Yeonshin pondering his identity. The man took a moment to glance at the frail-looking child, causing Yeonshin to feel lightheaded from the eye contact. Soon, the group of brutes knelt and greeted the man as their tribe leader. In that instant, Yeonshin recognized him. The man was the Tyrant Sword tribe leader, the ruler of the Tyrant Sword tribe, a faction within the unorthodox 13 Skies, and regarded as a harbinger of disasters in Jeongho. Yeonshin wondered why such a prominent figure, comparable to a patriarch of one of the 9 great sects, was present in this setting. Observing the fallen martial masters from the Jeongnan sect, Yeonshin concluded that they, along with himself, were nearly doomed. Taking a moment to breathe deeply and steady his mind, Yeonshin prepared to confront the Tyrant Sword tribe leader. Without hesitation, fear, or doubt, he advanced to launch an attack. Noticing the incoming strike, the squad leader unsheathed his sword to counter. However, before he could react, Yeonshin had already pierced his heart. This bold move immediately captured the attention of both the Tyrant Sword Tribe leader and the elder of the Jeong Sect. A mere 15-year-old dared to draw his sword and kill a member of the Tyrant Sword Tribe in front of its leader. Yeonshin taunted them, suggesting they could now kill him in retaliation. The tribe members instinctively drew their swords to attack the audacious boy, but halted abruptly upon their leader's command. The leader commended Yeonshin, praising his spirit as superior to everyone present. This left everyone puzzled, unsure of whom he was referring to. Surprisingly, the Tyrant Sword Tribe leader chose to spare the boy's life. Yeonshin surmised that the leader was unable to kill him. As he raised his sword, Yeonshin revealed that Yeonshin was the grandson of the former Divine Sword Group leader of the Desolate Fortress. This revelation astonished Yeonshin. Aware that the Divine Sword Group was the strongest in the Desolate Fortress, created by the Imperial family to thwart conspiracies by Murim forces, a formidable association to avoid. However, the Tyrant Sword Tribe leader clarified that this was not the reason for sparing Yeonshin. Instead, he admired the boy's temperament and spirit, qualities essential for a powerful martial artist in Jianghu. He expressed a desire to take Yeonshin as his disciple, provided it was not about the relation to the Desolate Fortress. This statement surprised those in the yard, as it was uncommon for a renowned martial master to take on a young disciple so readily. Stabbing his sword into the ground, the leader instructed Yeonshin to leave the area within a day and vowed to prevent any other sects or clans from entering their territory. Yeonshin and Yeonshin listened intently as the leader made his promise before departing. He glanced back briefly, indicating his openness to a duel and inviting Yeonshin to seek him out when he was ready for revenge. Determined, Yeonshin allowed his enemies to drive him away from his land, contemplating whether he could achieve revenge within his remaining 5 years of life. Back at the main pavilion, Yeonshin gazed at his dying father with an expression devoid of emotion. He grasped his father's hand, calling out to him. Daemyeon could only marvel at how his son, whom he had long shunned, had become so powerful, thanks to the martial arts Yeonshin had created. Suddenly, the father remembered his son nervously revealing that he had developed martial arts by modifying the Jeong Clan's movement arts. Instead of feeling proud, the father met his son's plea for approval with discontent and hatred. Tears streamed down his face as he finally recognized his own foolishness and ignorance, failing to see that his son had created the sacred art and possessed the qualities of a founder. With it, he let out his last breath, and the second son of the Jeong Clan wept over the loss of his father. Yeonshin rose to speak with the chief steward holding Hya, his niece. Fortunately, she was safe, merely unconscious from someone targeting her acupoint to knock her out before hiding her to protect her from the killers. Turning around, Yeonshin instructed his second brother to take care of her within the Jeong Sect, noting her exceptional affinity with the 5 elements, which would likely lead them to accept her. Meanwhile, Yeonshin would attend to his own matters. As if summoned, Yeonshin appeared to speak with Yeonshin. With the Tyrant Sword Tribe leader's involvement, she needed to report the incident to the Jeong Sect immediately. Upon being questioned, Yeonshin intended to go to the Desolate Fortress, his mother's family's domain, as he had nowhere else to grow stronger unlike his second brother. Not wanting to lose such talent, Yeonshin offered him the opportunity to train at Jeongnan Mountain. Yeonshin had already decided to head to the Desolate Fortress when Yeonshin revealed her intention to recommend him as the sect leader's disciple. This revelation shocked both men, given the significance of the offer. Becoming the direct disciple of the Jeongnan sect leader would grant him access to the absolute sacred art, and the leader was among the top 10 swordsmen in the world. However, Yeonshin had his own plans. He clasped his hands together and declined the offer, promising not to forget Yeonshin's kindness. Yeonshin anticipated his refusal, having sought someone as talented as him. This was likely what the Tyrant Sword Tribe leader had perceived as well. In the end, Yeonshin could only apologize as Yeonshin assured him that the Jeongnan sect's doors would always remain open for him. Yeonshin was aware that Yeonshin was one of the elder members among the noble races. Consequently, he inquired about the method to obtain the fruit of the Tree of Life. This fruit, protected by the Desolate Fortress leader, whom the emperor recognized as both king and peer, was said to grant eternal life and youth to those who consumed it, making it a celestial treasure. Yeonshin considered that acquiring this fruit could extend his already limited lifespan. However, Yeonshin had not lived half her own lifespan, rendering her without authority over the Tree of Life. Her knowledge was limited to the fact that the Desolate Fortress leader could grant the fruit to others. Realizing this, Yeonshin understood that his only option was to approach the Desolate Fortress. He acknowledged the difficulty in obtaining such a sacred item, even for the noble races. With no alternative methods known, he concluded that he must become the leader of the Divine Sword Squad, achieve remarkable feats, and request the fruit. Recognizing the boy's determination, Yeonshin decided to support him from a distance before departing to relay the news to her sect. She instructed two of her subordinates, the Cliff Swordsman and Neutral Spirit, to assist with the cleanup of the area. With their conversation concluded, Yeonshin departed for the Jeong sect. As morning dawned, the survivors of the incident completed burying the dead. Yeonshin expressed his gratitude to the two who remained to help, while the other survivors prepared to leave the land. In contrast, the two individuals from the Jeong sect were thankful to Yeonshin. His actions had led the Tyrant Sword tribe leader to abandon the fight and spare the survivor of the tragedy. Immediately afterward, Yeonshin's second brother called out to him. He conveyed that an apology alone could not rectify everything that had transpired within their clan. He vowed that upon their next meeting, he would strive to be a better older brother to Yeonshin, dedicating himself to the Jeong sect and hoping for his younger brother's survival. Yeonshin, recognizing that his brother would begin training in the Jeong sect's martial arts at a slightly older age and was not exceptionally talented, advised him to train as if his life depended on it. Turning his attention to his young niece, Yeonshin requested that his brother protect her, as she would accompany him. Next, the chief steward addressed his turn, mentioning his intention to join a small branch of the Jeong Clan within Nanine. With the Jeong Clan's bloodline still intact, he would oversee the remaining clan assets. As Yeonshin was set to head to the Desolate Fortress, he hoped they could reunite occasionally. He turned to wish the chief steward well, urging him to take care and live a comfortable life. With that, Yeonshin departed toward the Desolate Fortress without a servant or warrior to guard him. Watching his young master's departure, the chief steward pondered whether any of the Jeong descendants had ever spoken such words to him, highlighting Yeonshin's distinctiveness. A few days later, on a peaceful night in Xianyang, Yeonshin arrived at a restaurant with the Desolate Fortress visible in the distance. He overheard another guest praising the Desolate Fortress's incredible reputation. The guest also mentioned that people from all over the Central Plains gathered there with grand aspirations because of the fortress. Coincidentally, Yeonshin arrived just as the Desolate Fortress was conducting their entrance exam. Unexpectedly, a wild martial artist approached Yeonshin, inquiring whether he intended to take the entrance exam as well. Introducing himself as Hien Wonchong from the distant region of Shaanxi, he assumed Yeonshin hailed from nearby, believing his journey must have been effortless since he had to battle green forest bandits and swim against the pirate fortress crew. Wonchong continued to complain about the hardships of his journey. In truth, Yeonshin had encountered similar challenges, on top of nearly losing his entire family at home. Ultimately, Yeonshin asserted that his journey had been relatively easy for him. Recognizing that Yeonshin was younger, Wonchong proposed that they become friends and share information about the exam. He was astonished that Yeonshin was unaware of the existence of such an exam. Wonchong proceeded to elaborate on the exam, known as the trial, explaining that the Desolate Fortress differed significantly from typical martial arts groups. Just as aspiring government officials must excel in both martial arts and literature, there was a specific exam for joining the Desolate Fortress. Yeonshin listened attentively as Wonchong further explained that this was why so many people were gathered at that time. Regardless of one's foundational skills, upon joining, opportunities and training would be provided. It was no surprise that martial artists flocked there, with countless individuals learning various martial arts to pass the test. The Desolate Fortress was the world's strongest martial group, a place that made everyone's heart race with anticipation. People often remarked that those wishing to conquer the world with a single weapon should go to the Desolate Fortress. Since the imperial family ruling the Central Plains sought to control martial arts groups, all elixirs and advanced martial arts from around the world were concentrated there. Wonchong added that nearly nobody could pass the Desolate Fortress trial on their first attempt. Perhaps 1 in 1,000 succeeded, typically those destined to become next-generation leaders of reputable martial arts clans gaining prominence. After his extensive explanation, Wonchong suggested that they attend the Desolate Fortress entrance exam together the following day. Nonchalantly, Yeonshin agreed, thereby acquiring an unexpected sidekick on his journey. Reflecting on the situation, Yeonshin felt grateful that he did not need to seek his mother's family's assistance, as he was unaware of their location or appearance. The next morning arrived swiftly, and Yeonshin, accompanied by his new sidekick Wonchong, stood before the fortress gate. Yeonshin registered and received a wooden plaque inscribed with the word 13. Observing his surroundings, he noticed that all the exam participants were older than him, with some attempting it for the first time and others having taken it multiple times. Wonchong explained that the first exam involved simply standing before the examiner. A candidate would pass by accepting their plaque and fail by refusing to return it to the reception. The second exam was a tournament among the exam takers, and the third was an interview with the Desolate Fortress's master. Yeonshin was surprised that the master herself participated in the exam, as martial artists came to this fortress specifically for that opportunity. A conversation with an absolute master like her was an incredible chance to gain profound understanding. Once all preparations were complete, the examiner announced the first exam, to perform a swift sword art demonstration. Specifically, candidates were to execute a single swing using their fastest sword technique. Wonchong seized the opportunity to be the first to take the exam, his nerves apparent as he volunteered himself. Upon arriving before the examiner, his demeanor shifted, a change that Yeonshin immediately noticed. Observing his new sidekick, Yeonshin recognized that Wonchong possessed strength surpassing some of the vagabonds encountered on his journey. When ready, Wonchong concentrated his inner energy into every fiber of his muscles and executed a swift, precise sword slash. Spectators marveled at the speed of his technique. Some could see it clearly, while others could not perceive it at all. Wonchong awaited the examiner's judgment with nervous anticipation. Joy filled Wonchong as the examiner requested his plaque, indicating that he had passed the first exam. A smug expression crossed his face as he wished his new friend good luck. Confidently, Yeonshin approached the examiner with his sword in hand. Observers were taken aback by the presence of such a young man attempting the notoriously difficult Desolate Fortress entrance exam. Standing before the examiner, people presumed he was merely seeking advice from a random martial artist present. The examiner assessed Yeonshin briefly before signaling him to begin. In an instant, the examiner marked the time for Yeonshin to perform his sword strike. Within a split second, Yeonshin had already completed his technique, followed by a wave of energy that astonished both the examiner and the onlookers. Engrossed in his own thoughts, Yeonshin remained calm, while Wonchong was astounded by the speed of Yeonshin's sword strike. Yeonshin sheathed his sword as the examiner declared that the future of the Desolate Fortress was embodied in the frail-looking boy before him, instructing Yeonshin to submit his plaque. Respectfully, Yeonshin raised his hand in acknowledgement to the examiner before swiftly departing, leaving the crowd speechless. Wonchong followed, pondering whether his new friend hailed from a famous family. Yeonshin dismissed the notion, recalling that within the Desolate Fortress, only one's martial arts, talent, and effort mattered. Wonchong found it hard to believe that Yeonshin was attempting to enter the Desolate Fortress on his first try, questioning whether that was the reason everyone came here. Yeonshin expressed his sincere determination to give his all in the trials, understanding that Wonchong intended to leave after thanking him for his resolve. Meanwhile, Yeonshin hoped that the kind and talkative Wonchong would also pass the second exam. As he awaited the next challenge, Yeonshin checked into an inn to cultivate. He knew the second exam was a tournament where he would compete against others using his martial arts. With 3 weeks until the exam, Yeonshin focused on training his skills, including the Jung dynamic technique and his delightful sword techniques. The 3 weeks passed swiftly, and Yeonshin arrived at the gathering place for the second exam, prepared as he could be. A martial artist overseeing the second exam instructed the examinees to wait until their names were called. New members of the Desolate Fortress wore white, a sight that discouraged many upon seeing the strong inner energy emanating from someone dressed in white. However, Yeonshin remained indifferent, focusing solely on doing his best. Out of nowhere, Wonchong greeted him as young Lord Yeong, noting that Yeonshin had grown taller. Yeonshin sensed a change in Wonchong, recognizing that he had achieved something significant. The overseer announced that winning was not the sole objective of the exam. Even securing one of the 2 tournament matches would attract the attention of a Desolate Fortress masters observing the trials. From personal experience, Wonchong knew this was the most challenging aspect. He explained that the exam supervisors had higher standards that day because White Qilin was participating in the Desolate Fortress trial. The White Qilin from Namgung, renowned for eliminating a notorious bandit group before turning 15 and beheading the Swordsmaster of the unorthodox faction, the Shrouded Assassin, was present. Wonchong shared rumors of defeating all up-and-coming fighters at the 8 Great Families Dragon and Phoenix tournament by the age of 18. Yeonshin questioned why someone from such a dignified family, possessing martial dignity, would seek entry into the Desolate Fortress. Wonchong revealed that White Qilin was the child of a concubine and thus could not become a patriarch. Rising to the position of Desolate Fortress Squad's captain was akin to becoming a patriarch of the 8 Great Families, granting immense power. After Wonchong finished his explanation, Yeonshin's name was called for the second exam. Before departing, Yeonshin expressed his desire to see Wonchong again at the Desolate Fortress, indicating his hope for his psychic success in the trial. Yeonshin faced his first opponent, a sword martial artist known for his sadistic demeanor and bizarre remarks about Yeonshin's supposed destiny of despair. The opponent mocked the frail-looking child, likening him to a moth struggling in the light while laughing maliciously. Without warning, Yeonshin struck swiftly, landing a single blow to the opponent's face, effectively ending the encounter. The opponent was knocked unconscious by the powerful strike, leaving Yeonshin feeling remorse for his excessive force. Feeling that his opponent was too weak after all the trash talk and the single strike that ended the battle, Yeonshin waited nonchalantly, unsure of what would happen next as his previous opponent was dragged out of the arena. This brief battle had piqued the interest of a specific observer watching the fight. A gray-haired young man approached, challenging Yeonshin to a fight, confident that the frail-looking young man would accept. The martial masters in blue robes recognized this individual, someone else commenting, assuming that the squad leaders would fight over him. Yeonshin realized that this man might be the White Qilin, Namgung Washin. The martial masters present were eager to witness the Boundless Heaven technique. Yeonshin evaluated that Washin was about 5 years older and currently beyond his ability to challenge. Thanks to the Jung dynamic techniques, Yeonshin was more physically fit than Washin, but inferior in other aspects. Washin took up his sword and introduced himself, revealing that he had primarily trained the Boundless Heaven technique and the Infinity Steps. Yeonshin had no intention of refusing the challenge and introduced himself respectfully to his opponent. Washin was puzzled by Yeonshin's lack of unsheathing his sword, understanding that Yeonshin intended to engage in a single-strike fight as he reached for his sword's handle. Washin briefly smiled before channeling his inner energy into his sword, manifesting a magnificent aura sword. The essence of the technique Yeonshin had been practicing was unpredictability, intending to use an unexpected main attack amidst an unpredictable rhythm to lower his opponent's guard. The martial masters watched eagerly, anticipating a good fight as the referee began the countdown. The moment the referee started the fight, Yeonshin appeared before Washin and struck him. As it was clear that Washin used an aura sword, Yeonshin's sword shattered upon their clash. While some martial artists hoped for an intense battle, others were disappointed by the instant conclusion, believing Washin had won. Some marveled at the terrifying, delightful sword Yeonshin wielded, while the blue-robed martial masters were speechless at witnessing such a feat from a 15-year-old. Washin stared at his broken sword, trying to comprehend the attack's meaning before lowering his weapon. He then admitted his defeat, surprising both Yeonshin and the spectators. 2 blue martial masters deemed Washin's admission appropriate, acknowledging the impressive technique Yeonshin had performed despite being 5 years younger. They noted that Yeonshin's sword had broken because he had not yet mastered using true energy with his technique. Washin had never anticipated encountering a hidden powerful martial artist in Hunan and was horrified by what Yeonshin might become. The examiner instructed Yeonshin to proceed to the garden and wait, signifying that he had passed the second exam. Yeonshin offered respect to Washin, conveying his desire to duel him anytime. as if understanding his thoughts. Yeonshin felt the same way and expressed his anticipation for the duel. Yeonshin walked through the gate, observing several people who had already passed the second exam in the garden. They were astonished to see Yeonshin, as they had expected Namgung Yeonshin to advance first. Yet they saw a 15-year-old instead. Yeonshin reflected on his fight, knowing there was no chance of winning if the battle had continued. This was why he had used the most extreme form of Delightful Sword at the duel's onset. However, because Namgung Yeonshin had imbued his sword with true energy, Yeonshin's sword had broken. Yeonshin acknowledged his mistake in rashly using the Delightful Sword, but recognized that Yeonshin's admission of defeat demonstrated the nobility of a renowned family. The Jeong Clan was a third-rate branch in Shinya County, and if someone in the household had known such a skill, Yeonshin would have undoubtedly learned it. However, after fighting Yeonshin, he realized how the technique should be used upon witnessing it firsthand. In that instant, Yeonshin attempted to channel true energy into his broken sword. It wasn't merely about infusing energy into the weapon, but using true energy as a medium to become one with the sword. As Yeonshin mastered this, the people in the garden were astonished by the occurrence of a sword resonance. They all believed it was impossible for such a young person to achieve this. Yet, Yeonshin successfully unified himself with the sword, feeling as though the weapon and his body were one. This body-sword unification was a technique employed by the pinnacle sword martial masters. From that moment, Yeonshin knew that the sword technique he would use in this state was on another level. After fully comprehending his newfound ability, he smiled contentedly. Out of nowhere, Yeonshin sheathed his sword and congratulated Yeonshin on his enlightenment. It took Yeonshin a moment to realize the situation as the onlookers gathered to witness his breakthrough. He assumed that Yeonshin had been protecting him to prevent anyone from disrupting his enlightenment. Yeonshin expressed his gratitude to Yeonshin, acknowledging his protection without realizing it. He also congratulated Yeonshin on passing the Desolate Fortress trial. In return, Yeonshin laughed happily at Yeonshin's words. Wonchong approached, announcing that he had also passed the second exam. Yeonshin smiled and gladly congratulated him. Additionally, Wonchong revealed that Yeonshin had earned a nickname. When someone demonstrated exceptional martial prowess or attracted significant attention, they were often given a nickname and addressed by it. Unless the individual had committed atrocious and evil deeds, most nicknames represented great honor for martial artists, such as Cliff Swordsman, Neutral Spirit Fist, and White Shielan. Yeonshin could not believe he had earned such a title merely by completing the trials, yet it seemed that Yeonshin had also taken notice. From that moment forward, young Yeonshin of the Jeong Clan was to be known as the Lightning Genius, recognized for his talent of lightning. Yeonshin explained that if the martial artists of the Desolate Fortress referred to Yeonshin in that manner, it effectively became his nickname within the Jianghu. To commemorate the occasion, they engaged in lighthearted banter while waiting for the remaining contestants to conclude the tournament. The name Lightning Genius, young Yeonshin, was something he had never imagined while practicing the horse stance in the Yeong manner. Now, it was certain that his name would resonate across the world. Time swiftly passed within the arena designated for the second exam. The examiner announced that only one trial remained. Upon passing, the participants would officially join the Desolate Fortress. They proceeded to the pavilion where the master of the Desolate Fortress resided, prepared to be evaluated to join in her martial group. The first contestant entered the pavilion, but left dejected after being deemed unwelcome. One after another, participants came and went quickly, leading the trio to wonder if the fortress master was judging them solely by appearance without conversation. Soon, Yeonshin stepped forward, his face bearing the usual solemn expression, with one goal in mind: to heed the examiner's directive to ascend to the top. Upon arrival at the gate to the fortress master's office, it opened instantly. Yeonshin entered, finding the room adorned with an elaborate little garden leading to the fortress master. At the end of the room sat a green-haired lady on a wooden chair, embodying the noble race. Yeonshin announced his name to signify his readiness for judgment. He felt the profound aura emanating from her as she turned toward him. She was the Desolate Fortress leader, reputed to be the strongest in the world. Instead of issuing her judgment, she spoke of Yeonshin's bloodline, prompting him to wonder if she was aware of his mother's family. He inquired about the significance of her words. The fortress master commended Yeonshin's boldness, understanding that he already grasped her meaning. Yeonshin then admitted that he was the grandson of the former Divine Sword Group's leader. She revealed that his grandfather was soon to join the Elder Council, highlighting his obstinate nature. Just as noble and powerful individuals weighed their words carefully, she mentioned a wound Yeonshin possessed. Yeonshin dismissed her concern, asserting that it was merely a trivial family matter. In response, the lady clarified that it was not trivial, explaining that his trained body merely concealed it. Acknowledging that Yeonshin had only lived for 15 years, she agreed that it was not an issue for an outsider to comment on, but emphasized that familial matters needed resolution. Yeonshin apologized for his brazen remarks, now understanding that she had not intended to interfere with his family affairs. The transcendent aura she carried as someone with absolute strength indicated that her words were precisely what Yeonshin needed to advance in his journey. She stood up, her smile filled with aspiration for the young man before her. She expressed admiration for Yeonshin, noting his refusal to bow to anyone despite his clear objectives. This observation made Yeonshin wonder if she had discerned that his upper meridian was abnormally wide open. Consequently, he asked her whether someone like him could survive by consuming the fruit of the Tree of Life. The lady explained that while the facts about the fruit were not entirely inaccurate, it was indeed possible for him to obtain what he desired. Yeonshin pressed further, inquiring if he could attain it. She simply stated that it depended on his actions. Yeonshin raised his hands in gratitude, as if he were about to leave, only to realize he was still under trial. He questioned whether he had been accepted as a martial artist of the Desolate Fortress. Affirming his acceptance, the lady instructed him to leave, smiling as she addressed him as the next Divine Sword Group leader. This form of address confused Yeonshin. He was unsure if she was teasing him or genuinely recognizing his potential. Another possibility was that she implied he could obtain the fruit of the Tree of Life once he became the Divine Sword Group leader. Upon the conclusion of the Desolate Fortress trials, only 4 individuals had passed: a random old man, the white Chila Namgung Washin, the grin-faced Wonchong, and lastly, the lightning genius Yeonshin. The officer escorting them inquired whether they understood the role of the Desolate Fortress. Wonchong explained that their primary mission was to prevent Murim's martial masters from overthrowing the imperial family. The officer revealed that this was just one of their major tasks and that there was more to their duties. He elaborated that their role involved preventing or suppressing conflicts of a certain scale within the Jianghu. The uncertainty of outcomes from Murim conflicts was a concern. A bloodstorm had swept across the Central Plains 17 years prior, following rumors of the discovery of the Heavenly Demon's grave. It would have been manageable if the conflicts were limited to those seeking ultimate martial arts manuals or elixirs, but the heinous actions of vicious martial artists did not discriminate between martial artists and commoners. Witnessing such hellish scenes made the Empire unrecognizable, marking one of the disasters of the Heavenly Demon's grave. The officers added that unorthodox sects and demonic factions were not the sole problems. Orthodox groups, including the 9 great sects and 8 great clans, also posed significant threats. If the Desolate Fortress allowed them to operate unchecked, the people would suffer, leading to unrest and delayed tax payments, which would undermine the Empire's reign. To combat this, the imperial family had provided the Desolate Fortress with substantial resources, including money, elixirs, manuals, and martial masters. Their mission was to eliminate any martial artists who disrupted the lives of ordinary people. Shortly thereafter, they arrived at their assigned abodes. The officer explained that they would be allocated to specific places and moved to accommodations accordingly. A week passed swiftly, during which Yeonshin diligently cultivated in his room. The prolonged wait made him question why his assignment was delayed beyond his expectations. After a few more hours, Wonchong entered to deliver the news. It had been decided that both Yeonshin and Wonchong would join a combat squad known as the Radiant Demon Squad the following day. During the long weeks of waiting, rumors had been circulating. The 17 combat squad captains under the Divine Sword Squad had been battling each other to recruit new warriors. These captains, the martial masters representing the Desolate Fortress, were engaged in sparring to enlist the White Qilin and the Lightning Genius. This was the path through which Yeonshin would become part of the Radiant Demon Squad. The next day, Yeonshin and Wonchong arrived at the arena of the Radiant Demon Squad to receive their welcome. Wonchong grinned foolishly at his new white robe uniform, a symbol of his status as a martial artist of the Desolate Fortress, while Yeonshin surveyed the members of the squad. The members appeared eager to embrace the new recruits, exuding excitement and hope for their addition. However, Ma Jin, the Radiant Squad captain, stood before them with a menacing presence. Known as the strongest among the 17 squad captains, Ma Jin's reputation was now confirmed in person. He fixed his gaze intently on Yeonshin, aiming to intimidate him. Addressing Yeonshin as the lightning genius, Ma Jin spoke with a threatening tone. In response, Yeonshin met his gaze confidently, momentarily surprising Ma Jin before he smirked. Appreciating Yeonshin's resilience, Ma Jin acknowledged that individuals like him were not easily defeated. Ma Jin proceeded to explain that the combat squads under the Desolate Fortress Divine Sword Squad functioned similarly to sects within the Central Plains. He informed them that they would train in martial arts within the Radiant Demon Squad and undertake various missions. Pointing towards the back, Ma Jin indicated that their seniors were present among the squad members. Seizing the moment, Wonchong eagerly asked whether training in the Radiant Demon Squad meant that all martial arts would be shared among members. Ma Jin clarified that each martial artist's personal techniques remained their own, but the Radiant Demon Squad's martial arts would be taught to all members. Wonchong listened with great excitement, thrilled at the prospect of learning the renowned Radiant Demon arts. Ma Jin cautioned him to work diligently in mastering these arts to ensure his survival. Yeonshin was also familiar with the infamous Radiant Demon arts. The Radiant Demon Squad was renowned among the 17 squads for their ability to defeat the Plump Blossom Swordsman, the 24 elite swordsmen of the Manhwa Sect, without suffering any casualties. This victory bolstered the rumors that the Desolate Fortress was the strongest in the world. Ma Jin added that although the Desolate Fortress was affiliated with the Imperial family, attacking its martial artists did not constitute treason. Consequently, they needed to continuously strengthen themselves through rigorous training. Curious why such attacks were not deemed treasonous, Yeonshin listened as Ma Jin explained that the Jianghu was home to many eccentrics. Numerous individuals had lost their sanity from studying demonic arts or had become exceptionally skilled in mobility arts, allowing them to disrupt government officials before fleeing to remote areas. Therefore, the imperial family's authority did not extend to them, as their role was to combat martial artists rather than perform governmental duties. As a result, failure to become stronger would inevitably lead to their demise. Ma Jin then pointed to a man in a blue robe seated at the back. He explained that this individual had been slashed by Namgung's strongest swordsman during a mission and could provide a better description of the technique. The blue-eyed martial artist had experienced the king-style sword arts of the Jeong Clan, describing it as exceedingly formidable. Yeonshin recognized this technique as one of the strongest swordsmanship styles globally, a supreme martial art exclusively learned by the main descendants of the Jeong Clan. Ma Jin instructed the blue-eyed man to come forward promptly. Yeonshin considered that the Namgung's strongest swordsman was reputed to be the most formidable martial master of the Central Plain. The fact that this man had survived a battle against such a skilled master attested to the Radiant Squad member's strength. This senior, known as Chung Myung, had heard of Yeonshin's exceptional delightful sword art and wished to engage him first. Following Ma Jin's instructions, Yeonshin moved to the center of the arena to face Chung Myung. As he drew his sword, Yeonshin immediately focused on channeling his aura. The squad members watched tensely, anticipating how he would contend with a martial artist in a blue robe. Observing Yeonshin's spirited demeanor, Chung Myung smiled calmly as he took up his own sword, adopting a relaxed stance. In accordance with tradition, Chung Myung introduced himself, claiming to have been born and raised in Xiangyang, while simultaneously mustering his inner energy. Similarly, Yeonshin followed suit, though it was intriguing that no one knew much about Xinya, the place where Yeonshin was born and raised. It remained a fact that such a place existed and had produced such martial arts. Before commencing their sword exchanges, Chung Myung informed Yeonshin that he could sense the wind generated even by a 10-year-old child employing the tri-sword technique. This ability allowed him to discern an opponent's sword swings during combat, a subtle instruction he conveyed to Yeonshin. Chung Myung added that reaching this stage at such a young age indicated considerable talent and expressed his desire for Yeonshin to demonstrate all of his swordsmanship abilities during the fight. As Yeonshin grasped his sword's handle, he immediately initiated a sword resonance. This action surprised the surrounding members, including Ma Jin, who watched intently. In that moment, Yeonshin focused his strength and inner energy on his sword, preparing to strike at the casually standing Chung Myung. Yeonshin remained patient, able to detect his opponent's breathing through energy sensing. When Yeonshin deemed the timing right, he infused strength into his step, dashed toward Chung Myung, and instantly appeared before him. Yeonshin swung his sword without hesitation. However, Chung Myung met the incoming strike, and Yeonshin's attack seemed insufficient, causing him to be pushed back slightly. This puzzled Yeonshin, making him wonder how his opponent had time to raise his sword. Nevertheless, he regained his footing, aware that his opponent was the martial master who had survived an encounter with the strongest swordsman in Namgung. Determined, Yeonshin launched another attack, believing that confronting such an opponent was more manageable than he had initially thought. After performing a feint, Yeonshin turned to strike Chung Myung's abdomen. Chung Myung anticipated the move and blocked it with his sword. In that instant, Chung Myung vanished in a thin air before Yeonshin. However, Yeonshin was certain that Chung Myung was approaching, and just as he expected, Chung Myung reappeared behind him, aiming to strike Yeonshin's neck. Yeonshin managed to see the attack in time, ducked to evade it, and counterattacked. Chung Myung's deep experience was evident as he leapt off the arena to dodge the attack, leaving only his bandana exposed to receive the sword strike. This maneuver revealed that Chung Myung belonged to the noble race. The rapid exchange of attacks astonished all the members of the Radiant Demon Squad, including their captain, Ma Jin, who undoubtedly observed everything. Meanwhile, Yeonshin awaited another attack, contemplating the truth of the rumors after witnessing them firsthand. Noticing that his opponent was hesitating, Yeonshin decided to employ the Jung dynamic technique he had developed on his sword to launch an offensive. However, he was taken aback by the strange expressions on the squad members' faces. Realizing their surprise, Yeonshin lowered his sword and inquired about Chung Myung's opinion of his sword skills. Believing that Chung Myung had underestimated him, Yeonshin requested an honest evaluation. Instead of responding, Chung Myung asked Yeonshin his age, causing some frustration. Yeonshin disclosed that he was only 15 years old, questioning its significance. Chung Myung stated that their enemies would not show leniency based on their youth and emphasized that their current focus should be on their skills, indicating a genuine interest in Yeonshin's abilities. This further surprised Chung Myung, who still refrained from providing his evaluation. Yeonshin concluded that discussing his age was meaningless, given his short lifespan. The squad members were equally astonished to learn that their newly joined members were only 15 years old, yet already so skilled. Some believed Yeonshin was a celestial anomaly. One member, who had participated in the Dragon Phoenix submissions multiple times, had never encountered anyone like Yeonshin and doubted that mastering the instinct honing arts from birth could produce someone of Yeonshin's caliber. Another member, once the most talented person in his city, found his skills pale in comparison to the newly joined junior. Surveying the area, Yeonshin directed his gaze toward his captain, who appeared rigid, leaving others to speculate about his thoughts. One undeniable fact emerged. After engaging in only a few moves with the blue-robed members, Yeonshin's talent was recognized as extraordinarily formidable. A few days passed as the Radiant Demon Squad's captain trained the new recruits. Most of the members enjoyed witnessing the newcomers endure their captain's rigorous hazing. Wonchong struggled to catch his breath after failing to defend against Ma Jin's punches infused with inner energy. Ma Jin commended him for remaining standing instead of collapsing to the ground before instructing him to return and solidify what he had learned. In contrast, Yeonshin remained as calm as ever, diligently reinforcing the lessons from the strongest squad captain of the Desolate Fortress. Once Yeonshin finished, Ma Jin inquired whether he had grasped the essence of the steps. Yeonshin responded that it was about thinking and acting seamlessly. Ma Jin affirmed this, explaining that there was always a way to move regardless of the situation. He elaborated that the true essence of the Radiant Demon Arts was to move fluidly without disrupting the attack's trajectory before instructing Yeonshin to understand the deeper meaning of attack paths. Intrigued, Yeonshin asked for further explanation about the deeper meaning of attack paths. Ma Jin found it challenging to describe verbally and decided to demonstrate instead. Standing before the stone garden light post, he instructed both Yeonshin and Wonchong to observe carefully as other members gathered, eager not to miss the captain's technique. Ma Jin concentrated his inner energy, pressing his hand against the light post, generating immense pressure and causing a gust of wind. He then took a deep breath, completely relaxing his mind, body, and aura. Yeonshin noticed the moment the captain relaxed his breathing before striking, as if Ma Jin had already discovered the attack path. Seemingly finding his target, Ma Jin struck the light post with his bare left hand. The force of the attack caused the solid stone to crumble. After demonstrating the concept, Ma Jin took another deep breath, while the other members watched in amazement, even after witnessing it multiple times. Ma Jin further explained that following a perfect attack path would unleash the most powerful attacks. Yeonshin understood that they needed to master the timing of unleashing their strength. Ma Jin emphasized that, although he had shown them the technique, it was not something they could master after a single demonstration, highlighting that it was a lifelong pursuit. Contrary to Ma Jin's assertion, Yeonshin felt confident he could perform the technique immediately. He stepped toward another light post, causing Ma Jin to wonder if he intended to attempt it. In his mind, Yeonshin believed that the essence of core energy was great nature and questioned whether merely replicating what he had seen would suffice. At that moment, Yeonshin gathered his inner energy and utilized body-sword unification. After reaching the desired state, he slowly relaxed his mind and body. As he opened his eyes in this relaxed state, he observed a line on the surface of the stone light post. Yeonshin patiently waited until a point appeared on the light post. Using his sword scabbard, he struck the indicated point just as Ma Jin had demonstrated. Upon contact, a crack briefly appeared before the stone crumbled into rubble. Through this, Yeonshin comprehended the deeper meaning of attack paths. He had mastered all aspects of the Radiant Demon arts and now needed to continue training to apply it effectively in real combat. Yeonshin smiled contentedly before turning to see all the Radiant Demon squad members stupefied by how swiftly he had mastered the technique. Observing their surprise, Yeonshin humbly apologized for displaying an unbecoming side of himself, admitting it was his first attempt. He expressed a desire to engage in more real fights to properly utilize the Radiant Demon arts, acknowledging that ordinary practice would not suffice in life-and-death situations. Grateful for Ma Jin's instruction, Yeonshin thanked him as the captain perspired profusely from witnessing Yeonshin's rapid learning. Ma Jin realized he needed to reconsider his training approach for Yeonshin moving forward. The next day, Wonchong approached Yeonshin, informing him that their seniors had engaged in a fierce battle with the Heavenly Squad. Yeonshin knew that the Desolate Fortress strictly enforced its rules, and fighting outside the training grounds was punishable. This made him question the reason behind their seniors' confrontation. Wonchong explained that a member of the Heavenly Squad had initiated a fight at a restaurant, claiming that the Lightning Genius's talent could not flourish within the Radiant Demon Squad. Yeonshin frowned upon learning that the dispute stemmed from such a trivial matter. Wonchong then revealed that this was the true nature of the Murim. Minor provocations could lead someone to draw their sword against others, and the streets highly valued the ability to intercept such attacks successfully. In this instance, the seniors of the Desolate Fortress were enraged over a newcomer, causing Wonchong to fear that the same fate might befall him. However, Yeonshin saw this as an opportunity to obtain the fruit of the Tree of Life. Revered by all noble races, he needed to achieve something significant, which would require assistance from others. While the best way to earn a martial artist's trust was to owe them one's life, making a good first impression on squad members was also beneficial. Determined not to let the seniors' fight over him pass unaddressed, Yeonshin decided to visit his captain. Misunderstanding the purpose, Wonchong was overly excited, assuming Yeonshin was familiar with martial artist codes. Upon arrival at the training arena, they found everyone gathered. The members were perplexed as there was no training session scheduled for the white-robed members. One member suggested that the white-robed individuals had no need to train so intensely, while another opined the opposite, insisting they must train harder. Both Yeonshin and Wonchong approached Ma Jin to offer their greetings, prompting the captain to wonder if they were encountering training issues on their own. Yeonshin expressed his desire for a sparring session, to which Ma Jin suggested he could ask anyone present, and they would gladly spar with him. However, Yeonshin declined, stating he wanted to spar with a member of the Heavenly Squad. This request astonished the arena's members. Ma Jin contemplated that Yeonshin must have been aware of the previous day's events and advised him not to become too agitated. Nonetheless, Yeonshin insisted, expressing his wish to witness the heavenly sword arts he had long admired firsthand. Although Ma Jin believed Yeonshin was overly stirred, he was pleased that his junior was motivated by his seniors. Yeonshin remained steadfast, declaring his intention to spar and demonstrate the radiant demon art's superiority once more to his captain. Yeonshin aspired to gain fighting experience with the radiant demon arts, observe an advanced martial art, and leave a positive impression on his seniors. Achieving all three objectives simultaneously would be akin to killing 3 birds with 1 stone. Ma Jin noted that Yeonshin had neither trained in the same martial arts as the Heavenly Squad nor fought alongside them before. He explained that although it might be a sparring match, there was no reason they would go easy on Yeonshin. Ma Jin perceived Yeonshin's eagerness to engage in a fierce battle as genuine, believing that fighting tooth and nail was Yeonshin's intention. This revelation momentarily surprised the Radiant Squad members, who then cheered Yeonshin, expressing their desire to see his growth. Some even shouted that if Yeonshin managed to survive the fight, he could become the next captain of the Radiant Demon Squad. Ultimately, Ma Jin conceded and decided to convey the message to the Heavenly Squad to request a sparring match. Soon after, members from both the Radiant Demon Squad and Heavenly Squad gathered in the arena. Observers were puzzled by a white-robed member challenging a blue-robed one, but those familiar with Yeonshin recognized his formidable prowess. One member clarified that the fight was intended as a guidance match for learning purposes, leading others to speculate how long Yeonshin would endure against the blue-robed martial artist. Some believed it would be impressive if he could withstand about 10 bouts against the opponent. Conversely, Han Chulmak, the Heavenly Squad captain, estimated that a white-robed member from the Radiant Demon Squad stood no chance against his blue-robed counterpart. Unexpectedly, Chulmak bet one of the Heavenly Squad's elixirs that the white-robed Yeonshin would not last 10 bouts. Ma Jin considered the bet excessive for such a fight. Sensing Ma Jin's hesitation, Chulmak wondered if he feared losing the wager. Ma Jin dismissed the provocation, asserting that the Desolate Fortress's elixirs were not to be used frivolously. Chulmak countered by emphasizing that the honor of both squads was at stake, making the bet meaningful. In the end, Ma Jin accepted the wager. As Chulmak relaxed in his chair, he expressed confidence in winning the bet, believing that as the leader, he should trust his team's abilities. However, Ma Jin was certain that Yeonshin would emerge victorious. Shortly after, the blue-robed members of the Heavenly Squad began conversing. Yeonshin formally introduced himself, showing respect to his sparring opponent. He was aware that warriors typically started as white-robed fighters before advancing to blue robes, though not everyone achieved this progression. Some took over 10 years to become blue-robed warriors, often those who could not be defeated by top martial masters from major sects. The blue-robed warrior, Gu Il-wan, claimed to have trained in heavenly sword arts for 20 years. He mentioned that while swords were said to have no eyes, master swords did possess eyes. Despite this, he intended to show no mercy in the duel, intimidating Yeonshin with his formidable presence. Yeonshin acknowledged this stance, indicating his understanding. The moment Gu Il-wan unsheathed his sword, he released his sword aura. Observing the extraordinary aura, Chulmak smirked, certain he would not lose the bet. However, Yeonshin remained undeterred. Aware of the blue-robed warrior's strength, he was more curious about the sword style employed. He dismissed unnecessary thoughts and reached for his sword, determined to rely on his own martial arts style regardless of his opponent's techniques. Gu Il-wan, upon seeing Yeonshin wielding his sword, allowed him the first attack. As soon as the challenge was issued, Yeonshin charged forward using his Yeong dynamic technique. Their swords clashed, and Gu Il-wan successfully deflected the strike. It became evident that the white-robed warrior possessed remarkable speed, as Gu Il-wan prepared for another strike. Yeonshin's rapid attacks forced Gu Il-wan to fend off a barrage, causing Chulmak to sweat nervously, questioning if a white-robed member truly had such speed. Ma Jin mused that such skill at Yeonshin's age was breathtaking. With Yeonshin's abilities, he realized that failing to capitalize on this opportunity to swiftly defeat the opponent would mean forfeiting the chance to win. Yeonshin continued delivering lightning-fast sword strikes, with Gu Ilwan defending against each one. Reflecting on his young dynamic technique, Yeonshin felt content, recognizing his growth since joining. His physical training with his technique and martial principles had strengthened him. The trajectory of his sword was more inclined, utilizing his back muscles, and stepping forward with core energy created rotational force. During the battle, Yeonshin discovered a gap on his opponent's defense. He swung his sword upward, taking off Gu Ilwan's grip on his sword. Instantly, Yeonshin pointed his sword at his opponent's neck, signaling his victory in the sparring duel. Spectators were astonished by the young man's achievement. The Radiant Demon squad members cheered for Yeonshin's triumph, while Chulmak sweated profusely and Ma Jin smiled contentedly, pleased with the expected outcome. As usual, Yeonshin pondered for a moment, contemplating the technique he had just learned and ways to improve before Gu Ilwan approached him. He acknowledged that his victory was partly due to luck and overwhelming momentum, as his opponent had been caught off guard. Yeonshin understood that a rematch would likely yield a different result. He then offered his hand in respect to his opponent, thanking him for the opportunity to witness such high-level swordsmanship. Gu Ilwan smiled, taking his sword, and remarked on being surprised by the sword's trajectory and rotational force. He praised Yeonshin's martial prowess, noting it surpassed his years. As Gu Ilwan left the arena, Yeonshin received accolades for his incredible sword talent, solidifying his title of Lightning Genius. Onlookers were amazed that the Radiant Demon Squad had discovered such a talent, leading to feelings of envy. Meanwhile, Ma Jin raised his hand to claim the bet Chulmak had placed. Yeonshin decided to name his new technique Energy Accumulation Discharge before Ma Jin approached him with a box. Inside was an elixir from the Heavenly Squad, indicating that Ma Jin chose to grant Yeonshin the spoils of the bet to aid his accelerated growth. Soon, a group of blue-robed warriors stood guard at the Radiant Demon Squad pavilion. Among them was Zen Demon Sword Beck Mirio, who shared her thoughts with Chung Miyang. She doubted that Yeonshin could defeat a skilled swordsman like Gu Ilhuan, another blue-robed warrior. Additionally, she recognized Yeonshin's hardworking, humble, and polite nature. His ability to discern martial arts was exceptional, embodying the ideal child parents often praise. In her view, Yeonshin was nothing short of a monster. Chung Miyang was confident in Yeonshin's unprecedented talent. Meanwhile, Mirio observed that during each sparring session, Yeonshin managed to apply the same principles in varied postures with greater precision. She felt reluctant to use exclusive martial arts around him, knowing his innate ability to reinterpret techniques. Chung Miyang agreed, sensing that Yeonshin had mastered martial arts long ago, exuding an aura of a true monster. Inside, Yeonshin sat cross-legged as Ma Jin expressed uncertainty about how much elixir Yeonshin could extract. Typically, individuals absorbed 60 to 70%, sometimes even less, depending on circumstances. Ma Jin cautioned Yeonshin against acting recklessly due to low absorption rates, warning of potential damage to his energy core or blood vessels. He advised Yeonshin not to become overly obsessed with absorption. Ma Jin further explained that consuming an elixir involved allowing it to flow endlessly into one's core energy until fully melted. He would intervene if Yeonshin's energy circulation became unstable, advising him to remain unperturbed and adapt accordingly. With this guidance, Yeonshin swallowed the pill in his hand, immediately feeling his energy surge as the elixir entered his body. He focused intently on absorbing the elixir's energy. Ma Jin watched Yeonshin's cultivation carefully to prevent any mishaps. The other blue-robed warriors from the Radiant Demon Squad remained on guard, observing Yeonshin's initiation. They were all curious about the extent of Yeonshin's strength after consuming the elixir. Energy flowed continuously from the elixir, and Yeonshin directed it through his meridians to each core energy point in his body. Ma Jin grew annoyed, expecting intervention only to find Yeonshin effortlessly absorbing all the elixir's energy independently. Despite it being Yeonshin's first time, his energy circulation was flawless, eliminating the need for Ma Jin's assistance. Shortly after, Yeonshin opened his eyes, sensing his energy had reached an entirely new level. Ma Jin sighed in acknowledgement, congratulating Yeonshin for fully absorbing the elixir. Yeonshin felt the newly acquired core energy was exceptionally strong. Ma Jin had not anticipated Yeonshin's successful and solitary absorption of the entire elixir. With increased energy, Yeonshin could now detect presences he previously couldn't and noticed his seniors surrounding the area. They were protecting him, recognizing his vulnerability during elixir absorption. Yeonshin voiced his curiosity about their kindness towards him. Ma Jin clarified that the squad's care was standard for all Radiant Demon squad members, a norm after risking one's life multiple times on the battlefield. Increased strength benefited both the individual and the squad. Afterwards, Yeonshin spent time consolidating his knowledge and cultivating as usual in his room. His newfound energy surpassed anything he had before. Deciding to test his enhanced martial arts, Yeonshin went to the training ground, where he encountered Zen demon Swordbeck Mirio. She inquired if he was training out of boredom. Yeonshin admitted it, and Mirio mentioned she had noticed something during his fight. Demonstrating her findings, she offered to spar with him. Seizing the rare opportunity, Yeonshin acknowledged that while he could train alone anytime, sparring with her palm strike technique was exceptional opportunity. In return for her offer, Mirio requested that he call her by her name instead of her warrior title. Preparing to spar, they eyed each other intently. Yeonshin drew his sword, intending to make the first move. Mirio welcomed the challenge, ready to exchange blows using her palm technique. As Yeonshin acted, he swiftly drew his sword to Mirio's neck. Unfazed, Mirio moved forward, grabbing Yeonshin's hand. She drew close, within an inch of his face, before pulling his hand away and channeling her inner energy into her palm. She struck toward Yeonshin's chest, pushing him slightly. Subsequently, Mirio clenched her left hand, mustering her aura technique. Observing her method, Yeonshin employed a similar technique on his palm to defend against her attack. Their strikes collided, but Mirio's technique was more refined, pushing Yeonshin back despite his similar approach. The spar concluded with Mirio expressing her astonishment at Yeonshin's ability to defend against her palm technique. Yeonshin inquired if she trained in the one-inch strike, to which she confirmed her practice. A swordsman trained in Radiant Demon arts was not limited to swords alone. She added that the one-inch strike was highly effective in close combat. To manage the energies within her body, she first dismantled the enhanced protection energy. By using core energy in a burst discharge to increase tension, the one-inch strike became more efficient. Though unspoken, Mirio felt proud of her ability to blend her exclusive technique with a one-inch strike. Yeonshin then sought permission to share something. He admitted his heightened sensitivity to detecting energy since childhood and felt Mirio's use of core energy had captured his attention. This revelation surprised her, as being able to perceive her core energy movements was unprecedented. However, Yeonshin clarified that he did not see her core energy. He simply sensed its presence within her body. Yeonshin could only perceive the flow of the burst discharge and the waves of core energy emanating externally. That is still really hard to believe, Mirio remarked, adding that even purple robe martial masters might lack energy detection skills of such caliber. The hierarchy of the Desolate fortress was marked by robes of different colors: white, blue, black, and purple, with purple-robed masters occupying the highest ranks. Mirio speculated that it might be possible only if it were Yeonshin, deciding to heed his advice. Reflecting on Mirio's palm strike, Yeonshin considered that her technique seemed better suited for the puncturing method rather than the one-inch strike. After receiving her strike, he realized that although it appeared more appropriate for a one-inch strike, the manner in which she discharged her energy made it more potent when combined with the puncturing technique. Suddenly, Mirio's demeanor changed to anger as she rebuked him, questioning whether he thought she was an idiot incapable of using something as simple as the puncturing technique. She further inquired if that was the reason she hadn't utilized it. Ultimately, Yeonshin refrained from pressing the matter further and apologized for his unnecessary comment that had upset her. Mirio promptly turned around, apologized in return, and thanked him for his input before abruptly leaving Yeonshin alone in the training arena. Mirio proceeded to the captain's office to meet with Ma Jin, revealing that Yeonshin had deduced her martial arts techniques. She inquired whether Ma Jin had ever disclosed the origins of her martial arts to Yeonshin. Ma Jin was perplexed, dismissing her concerns by asserting that he would never divulge such important information to Yeonshin. This left Mirio puzzled about how Yeonshin had uncovered her methods. After some discussion, they concluded that Yeonshin had figured out that she had modified the lost martial arts known as the Heavenly Demon Sacred Arts. Ma Jin acknowledged Yeonshin's uniqueness, stating that individuals like him were rare in the Murim world. Pinnacle martial masters were esteemed as some of the strongest alongside the noble and iron races. Mirio questioned whether Yeonshin was truly that exceptional, to which Ma Jin affirmed his belief that Yeonshin was undoubtedly the future of the Desolate Fortress. Ma Jin noted that while he was unaware of others' perceptions of Yeonshin, Yeonshin's advice should not be underestimated or dismissed as trivial. Mirio asked if the squad captain had indeed instructed her to discuss the Heavenly Demon Sacred Arts with Yeonshin. Ma Jin confirmed, explaining that mastering it alone had its limits and that he lacked the time to assist her personally. The appropriate course of action was to seek Yeonshin's help, as he possessed qualities akin to a martial arts founder, capable of adapting any martial art to one's body. Ma Jin advised her to wait if she felt uneasy about this before introducing a minor mission that had just arisen. He wanted her to form a team with Yeonshin to observe how he navigated life and death situations and to determine if he was as special as believed. Ma Jin was convinced that within 5 years, Yeonshin would become the next Radiant Demon Squad captain. The following day, Yeonshin, Baek Mirio, Wonchong, and Chung Myung mounted their horses and rode toward the mission location. Ma Jin's words lingered in Mirio's mind as she sought to ascertain whether Yeonshin was truly worthy of becoming her superior. They traveled without stopping, and by the 10th night, they arrived at the stage station in Zemping County. Wonchong was weeping in agony from the relentless ride, which had taken a toll on his body, while the other 2 blue warriors and Yeonshin remained as sharp as ever. Before their departure, Ma Jin had explained that recently, individuals offering services to the Blood Flame cult had settled in a nearby village, routinely slaughtering livestock and destroying crops. Typically, the Shangxi branch could handle such threats, but an incident involving the theft of the Manhwa Sect's elixir, the Plum Blossom Pill, comparable to the Shaolin Temple's Great Revitalization Pill, had escalated the situation, affecting all of Shangxi. With no spare manpower, the main Desolate Fortress branch had requested assistance. Ma Jin tasked the 4 with addressing this issue. Yeonshin was aware that the Blood Flame cultists were extremists devoid of humanity. Unexpectedly, an obnoxious, overweight official emerged, complaining about the delay in accepting the request. He boasted about his desire to treat the Desolate Fortress with respect, but no longer wished to do to their perceived laxity. He further criticized the decision to send a young lad, disregarding that the group consisted of martial artists rather than mere thugs. Yeonshin turned to his seniors, inquiring about the nature of this individual. Chung Myung responded that such ignorant officials were common, having encountered many who had never witnessed a true martial artist. People like this official mistakenly believed the Desolate Fortress was their personal servant. Observing the official like a pig, Yeonshin asked if he could block the man's mute acupoint. Chung Myung granted permission before instructing them to handle the matter swiftly and depart. The official persisted in voicing his grievances until Yeonshin struck his mute acupoint, rendering him mute. Yeonshin then explained that they did not take orders from him and left him unharmed. As they proceeded toward their accommodations to rest, Wonchong realized that Yeonshin had learned to block acupoints as well. He expressed his intention to address Yeonshin respectfully by using his warrior name. In return, Yeonshin permitted Wonchong to do as he pleased, addressing him as the Desolate Fortress Sacred Warrior, which made Wonchong proudly accept the title. Chung Myung approached Yeonshin to elaborate on the relationship between the Murim and the government, explaining that they did not interfere with each other and neither would invade the other. However, within the government, the Desolate Fortress enjoyed more freedom than other martial artists due to the imperial family's support. This autonomy allowed them to confront those who erroneously believed they were under the Desolate Fortress's control. Mirio joined the conversation, advising Yeonshin never to overextend himself. She commended his recent action against the official, considering it exemplary. During their discussion, Wonchong noticed movement in the distance. He alerted the others, and they focused their attention, a red-haired man wielding a sword was seen taking a child from the villagers. Yeonshin immediately identified the aggressor as a blood-flame cultist. Acting swiftly, he was the first to move, dashing toward the man in an attempt to rescue the child. Although Yeonshin was the first to initiate the move, Chung Myung swiftly outpaced him during the run. Yeonshin speculated whether his senior was utilizing the noble race's mobility art known as grass flutter. Following Chung Myung, Mirio accelerated past, and even Wonchong managed to move faster than Yeonshin after a few steps. This observation made Yeonshin aware of his weakness, realizing that he had insufficient training in mobility arts. The absence of proper mobility arts training at Yeong Manor placed him at a significant disadvantage. Meanwhile, a blood flame cultist launched an attack on a villager. The villager demanded the return of the child, while the cultist firmly resisted, telling the crying child to be quiet. He contemplated that the child, being full of life energy, posed a different kind of noise. Before the red-haired brute could act further, Chung Myung arrived and launched an attack. Unfortunately, the brute successfully blocked Chung Myung's sword strike. At that moment, Chung Myung positioned himself between the cultist and the villagers to shield them from harm. Additionally, he rescued the child from the brute's grasp. Surprised by the unexpected appearance of a martial artist from the Desolate fortress, the red-haired brute turned around, realizing he was in a predicament with another blue-robed martial artist approaching. Instantly, he summoned strength from his core energy and attempted to flee before Mirio could catch up. Both Chung Myung and Mirio were taken aback by the brute's decision to flee rather than engage them. Ultimately, observing his remarkable speed, Mirio concluded that his mobility art likely traded his own life force for enhanced swiftness. Shortly thereafter, Wonchong arrived. Although he was faster than Yeonshin, his physical condition appeared poor, evident from his heavier breathing. Chung Myung returned the child to the parent before they all retreated to rest for the night. A little later, Mirio reprimanded Wonchong, acknowledging his martial arts proficiency suitable for a white robe, but noting his insufficient stamina. She advised him to focus on improving his stamina moving forward. Yeonshin anticipated receiving similar criticism, but Mirio commended him instead. His fundamental training was exceptionally thorough, making him a rarity even among the 9 great sects and 8 great clans. She had noticed his prowess when he ran without employing any techniques. Given his physical abilities alone, it was unlikely that anyone in the Radiant Demon Squad could rival him. Mirio then remarked to Chung Myung that a frail and thin member of the noble race like him could never match Yeonshin in physical capabilities. Chung Myung laughed, encouraging Yeonshin not to be disheartened by his lack of knowledge in mobility arts. Despite his reassurances, Chung Myung recognized Yeonshin's underlying disappointment. Approaching a nearby tree, Chung Myung offered to teach Yeonshin the mobility arts he employed. This gesture surprised Yeonshin, as he believed Chung Myung's mobility art was an exclusive skill. Chung Myung clarified that it was not a technique from his household's martial arts, but rather the movement style of the noble races. Typically, individuals couldn't master it even with understanding, but Chung Myung believed Yeonshin might have the potential. He cautioned Yeonshin not to rejoice prematurely, noting that no one in the Radiant Demon Squad had been able to learn it. Mirio added that although Chung Myung had taught interested members of the Radiant Demon Squad, none had succeeded. Soon after, Chung Myung demonstrated the movement, explaining that while it was termed a mobility art, it relied on nothing physical. Yeonshin observed energy at the tip of Chung Myung's feet, noticing the absence of abrupt movements in his core energy. Immediately after, Chung Myung employed his mobility technique to ascend the tree, describing it as the noble race's method of walking and running. Yeonshin realized that Chung Myung's footsteps were so light that, had he not been visible before his eyes, he might have been undetected. He also understood the sacred methods of the noble races, which did not utilize core energy, but a similar force supporting the body. Descending, Chung Myung moved gracefully, akin to a falling leaf. Chung Myung then inquired whether Yeonshin comprehended the technique. Yeonshin contemplated how to harness core energy to create wind, lacking the authority of the noble races. Chung Myung was puzzled, wondering if Yeonshin could discern the energy of nature merely by observation. Yeonshin affirmed his understanding and questioned whether that was the reason for the demonstration. Expressing gratitude, Yeonshin began brainstorming ideas. He continued to ponder the execution of the technique extensively. Realizing it would take time, Wonchong entered the inn to secure a place for rest. Meanwhile, Yeonshin immediately began cultivating, striving to find a way to utilize his energy to develop a mobility art. Before long, he formulated a concrete idea on how to use his energy similarly to the nature-infused energy his senior possessed. Outside, Chung Myung slept peacefully in a hammock tied to a tree until awakened by the sound of the door creaking open. Yeonshin ventured out in the middle of the night, ignoring Chung Myung's solitary rest. He moved to an open area and concentrated his inner energy at the tips of his feet. Chung Myung was astonished to witness Yeonshin replicating his technique within the same night. A month swiftly passed, and as Wonchong trained, he sighed. It was hard to believe that Yeonshin had mastered the noble race's mobility art. Chung Myung remarked that no one could deny Yeonshin's qualities as a martial arts founder. Eventually, even their captain chose to concentrate on his own mobility arts. This reminded Mirio of Ma Jin's advice, prompting her to assess whether Yeonshin was worthy of becoming her superior. On this note, Wonchong inquired whether it was acceptable to send Yeonshin alone on the mission. Mirio responded that the enemy should be the ones to fear, advising them to remain inside for another month. Additionally, she stated that since it was merely a reconnaissance mission, Yeonshin alone would suffice. Although Yeonshin's heart brimmed with joy, he felt lighter with each step. The balance between speed and effort had significantly improved compared to before. Soon, he arrived in front of a wooden house. After several hours of running, he had finally located their hideout. His next move was to return and inform the others. Suddenly, Yeonshin witnessed a horrifying sight. A blood-flame cultist leisurely sucking the essence of a young boy. This act starkly contradicted everything Yeonshin believed in. Determined, Yeonshin chose to reveal himself, calmly approaching the man. The cultist questioned the identity of the young man, daring to approach him in broad daylight. A gluttonous smile spread across the cultist's face as he eyed Yeonshin. A brazen young man radiating life energy, standing alone in such an unexpected place. Rising to his feet, the man reached for his sword at his waist and advanced toward Yeonshin. He laughed joyfully, confident that a mere white robe from the desolate fortress was no match for him alone. However, before the cultist could swing his sword, Yeonshin's blade swiftly severed his neck, decapitating him. As always, Yeonshin required only a fraction of a second to execute a decisive strike, ending a life instantly. He then looked at the child, feeling a sense of fate's cruelty, reminiscent of his own family's massacre and similar tragic fate. Yeonshin gathered his core energy into his sword and prepared to strike the wooden house before him. He vowed to bury the child after resolving the situation, refusing to allow any member of the demonic cult to survive. This resolve mirrored the teachings of Ma Jin. Channeling his core energy, Yeonshin visualized the attack path toward the wooden house. He then unleashed a magnificent sword aura attack, slashing the house in half. One blood flame cultist was swept away by the horizontal sword strike, while the remaining members froze in place, bewildered by the sudden assault. Without waiting for the cultists to regroup, Yeonshin advanced toward the wooden house. He didn't give them a chance to fight back, stabbing his sword directly into a man's heart. Yeonshin remarked that blood flame cult members believed the weak were prey for the strong, and now they were being eliminated by someone stronger. After eliminating one guard outside and two more inside the house, Yeonshin discovered a cave leading deep underground. He sensed a significant amount of energy emanating from within the cave, indicating that this was not merely a hideout for a few cultists, but a branch of the blood flame cult. Before long, a group of cultists emerged, one of them screaming that anyone daring to attack this place would meet their death. Yeonshin recognized the first cultist he had encountered in the village. Instead of fleeing upon realizing this was a branch of such a vile cult, Yeonshin chose to stand his ground and fight. Utilizing his newly acquired movement technique, he advanced to the center of the group and performed a delightful, yet deadly, sword dance. The cultists never anticipated a white-robed martial artist from the desolate fortress to attack them in such a manner. In a single breath, they were dispatched to their maker. Meanwhile, Yeonshin pondered the unnaturally vile aura emitted by such a small group of people. His thoughts were confirmed when a voice echoed from deep within the cave, expressing disbelief at the destruction caused by a white robe of the desolate fortress. Observing the shadowy figure in the cave, Yeonshin realized that this dark energy did not belong to the fallen cultists. A tall man emerged before him, and Yeonshin assessed that this individual was on a completely different level compared to those he had fought thus far. Yeonshin recalled that when a part of one's body reverts to its original state, it signifies that the person has reached the level of refining their core energy. Gritting his teeth, Yeonshin recognized the man before him as the strongest individual in charge of this place, the branch leader. From his knowledge, they were known as Blood Master Swordsmen within the Blood Flame cult. Gazing at the tiny, young boy in front of him, the Blood Flame cult branch leader declared his intention to use Yeonshin's pain to strengthen his blood. Blood Master Swordsmen are the title bestowed upon the branch leaders of the Blood Flame cult. To ordinary individuals or their subordinates, these leaders resemble death gods, and few martial masters possess the skill to defeat them. Yeonshin stands fearlessly before such a being, gathering his core energy into his sword to perform the body-sword unification. His intention is to go all out before his enemy can approach. In the past, Yeonshin had only been able to secure victory by launching a barrage of attacks before his opponent could react. Attempting the same strategy, he prepares to swing his sword for the first strike. The branch leader of the Blood Flame cult mocks Yeonshin by invoking the name Desolate Fortress, which has inflated his arrogance. Unfazed, Yeonshin swings his sword using the Jung dynamic technique he developed. Unfortunately, the cult branch leader dodges the attack just in time. Drawing upon a movement technique learned from his senior, Yeonshin immediately advances to launch another assault. He continues to barrage the Blood Flame cult's branch leader with swift sword strikes, while the leader adeptly evades each one. Observing the intensity of Yeonshin's attacks, the Blood Master smiles and acknowledges that he is not bad. This acknowledgement somehow affects Yeonshin, reminding him of his own past helplessness after nearly losing his entire family. He grits his teeth, persists in his attacks, and steels his mind, affirming that he is no longer his former self. Spotting an opportunity, Yeonshin grabs the branch leader's hand. He uses his reinforced hand to crush the Blood Master's hand used to wield his sword. Only then does the Blood Master realize the difficulty of dealing with this young opponent. Summoning his vile core energy into his left hand, he attempts to grab Yeonshin, whom he had previously dismissed as a mere pest. However, Yeonshin proves faster, already swinging his sword to cleanly sever the Blood Master's hand. The leader screams in pain, rendered a helpless and impotent martial master. Despite this, Yeonshin does not relent, delivering the final blow with all his might. His sword strikes the center of the Blood Master's chest. The leader is incredulous, unable to believe he was defeated by a mere white robe warrior from the Desolate Fortress. Yeonshin addresses the fallen figure, implying that the leader has only inflicted pain on others without experiencing it himself. Yeonshin allows his body to slump as he swings his sword to wipe it clean of blood. He then steadies his breathing after the fierce battle, amidst bodies lying around. Shortly after, Yeonshin notices a hole in the ground. He approaches it and witnesses the cruelty of this Blood Flame cult branch. With solemn eyes, he hopes that all the victims find peace in paradise after meeting such a fate. As night falls, Yeonshin returns with the boy, who turned out still breathing, albeit weakly. This sight surprises Wonchong, Mirio, and Chung Myung, who see Yeonshin bloodied and holding the boy in his arms. Yeonshin hands the boy to Wonchong for care, who is astonished by the boy's condition. Mirio inquires whether Yeonshin had fought someone, asking what happened and if Yeonshin is all right despite the blood on him. Yeonshin simply states that the blood is not his own. He claims to be fine and reveals that he discovered a place that appeared to be a branch of the Blood Flame cult. Mirio breathed a sigh of relief upon learning that her junior was safe, only to be taken aback by the revelation that he had discovered something so perilous. She screamed in shock, questioning whether it was truly the Blood Flame cult branch. Yeonshin explained that there were 8 red-haired Blood Flame cultists, including one who was causing trouble in Jinping County, and a particularly strong demonic cultist with red and black hair. Mirio stated that anyone with red and black hair must be a Blood Master swordsman. Consequently, Yeonshin must have found their branch. She couldn't believe that a Blood Flame cult branch had taken root and was exploiting the local population. Without uttering a word, Chung Myung took his sword and placed it at his waist. He declared that regardless of the mission's nature, the Blood Flame cult was a target of the Desolate fortress that needed to be eradicated, and informed the others that they would now raid their branch. Praising Yeonshin for his remarkable achievement, he advised him to rest and walked away. Mirio concurred with his remarks, deciding to accompany Chung Myung in dismantling the branch. Before departing, Yeonshin insisted that their presence was unnecessary, suggesting that they should enlist government troops instead and focus on aiding the victims. Wonchong struggled to grasp Yeonshin's statement, prompting Mirio to inquire whether Yeonshin had already defeated all of them, including the Bloodmaster Swordsman. Yeonshin casually claimed that he had already killed them all. Chung Myung found it hard to believe that Yeonshin had single-handedly destroyed a Blood Flame cult branch. In response, Yeonshin revealed that the mobility arts taught by his senior had significantly aided him. This revelation left Chung Myung speechless, as it was unheard of for a new white robe martial artist to contend with a Bloodmaster Swordsman. Mirio then explained that the Bloodmaster Swordsman possessed a peculiar regeneration ability, making it extremely dangerous to confront him alone. She wanted to know how the battle had unfolded. She detailed that some had driven them to the brink of death, but were ultimately stabbed in the backs and killed because they were unaware of the regeneration ability. Yeonshin presented the head of the supposed Bloodmaster Swordsman with red and black hair, pondering whether he had ever utilized the regeneration ability. He felt an urge to decapitate the branch leader after witnessing the mountain of corpses he had caused. Although Yeonshin still wondered about the regeneration ability's danger, Chung Myung assured him of its existence and stated that the fight was over. Upon returning to the Desolate fortress, the two blue robe warriors reported everything to Ma Jin. He expressed surprise that a Blood Flame Master Swordsman had been involved in what he had anticipated to be a simple mission. He mused that this situation might actually be advantageous, as it allowed them to witness the true capabilities of the white robes on the mission. Ma Jin then inquired about the lightning genius's behavior in life and death situations. Mirio doubted the accuracy of what had transpired, while Chung Myung was puzzled by the question. Ma Jin clarified that if a Blood Master Swordsman had been present, their forces must have been at least at the branch level, indicating a very dangerous scenario for the white robes. He surmised that they assaulted the branch by bringing the two white robes and destroying it. In the end, Mirio admitted that they hadn't actually witnessed anything firsthand. She revealed that Yeonshin had embarked on the reconnaissance mission alone and had annihilated the entire Blood Flame cult branch by himself. Ma Jin sought clarification, confirming that Yeonshin had gone alone and killed all the Blood Flame cult members, including the Bloodmaster Swordsman. Ma Jin felt a surge of shock when Chung Myung simply affirmed his statement. Meanwhile, Yeonshin remained deep in thought as usual, while Wonchong expressed disbelief at how he had become attached to the place and how pleasant it was to return. Wonchong then inquired if Yeonshin sensed an electric atmosphere upon their return. Yeonshin concurred, likening it to the ambience of a festival. Wonchong, known for his penchant for gossip, revealed that the former Divine Sword Group captain had returned to vie for the position of Elder Council leader. Accompanying him was a boy, reportedly an adopted son of the renowned Desolate Male clan, rumored to be exceptionally talented. Yeonshin was aware that the Desolate Male clan was his mother's lineage, yet they had never visited Shinya County before, not even during his mother's wedding. After Yeonshin's birth, they had not reached out once. Yeonshin smiled, considering such stories typical of village tales, as if his mother's family had severed all ties after she married into a household they deemed lower in status. The next morning, Yeonshin reported to his squad captain as summoned. Ma Jin examined Yeonshin intently from head to toe, noticing the remarkable transformation after his mission, evident in the change in Yeonshin's energy. The thought that Yeonshin had single-handedly destroyed an entire Blood Flame cult branch was impressive and not mere luck, Ma Jin mused. He then stood up, instructing Yeonshin to follow him, mentioning that the Fortress Master had requested a joint meeting. Yeonshin pondered why the Desolate Fortress Master, holding such a position, would seek a meeting with them. As he followed his captain, Yeonshin inquired if there had ever been instances where she requested meetings with White Robe Warrior after their enlistment. Ma Jin responded sternly that it had never happened. As they walked, people not only showed respect to the Black Robe Squad captain, but also to Yeonshin, known as the Lightning Genius. Murmurs spread as onlookers recognized Yeonshin not only for his reputation in the Radiant Demon Squad, but also as the one who had killed a Blood Master swordsman while wearing a white robe, a fact that seemed hard to believe given Yeonshin's youthful appearance. Ma Jin explained that it was natural for others to pay attention to Yeonshin. His ability to destroy a blood flame cult branch alone marked him as a martial master within the Desolate Fortress. With this in mind, Yeonshin walked confidently beside his captain to meet the fortress master. Yeonshin's perception of time was different, and he did not afford himself the luxury of it. Determined to survive, he aimed to become as strong as a Divine Sword Group captain before turning 20. His goal was to advance from white to blue, surpass black robes like his captain, and lead squads such as the Radiant Demon Squad as a purple robe or Divine Sword Group captain. They arrived at the fortress master's office, and as Ma Jin knocked on the door, they overheard her mention that the former Divine Sword Group captain had a grandchild. The old man responded by asserting that the blood of a lowly place could not travel far and expressed his desire not to bring shame to the Ma clan. Ma Jin and Yeonshin continued to wait as the old man claimed that the child accompanying him was his successor, emphasizing that despite not being from the main family, the child was exceptionally talented. Shortly after, the door opened, and Ma Jin and Yeonshin entered the room. Inside, alongside the fortress master, stood the old man, who was purportedly the former captain of the Divine Sword Group, accompanied by a young boy. The green-haired fortress master greeted the newcomers with a solemn smile on her face. Yeonshin studied her intently, pondering her intentions, until Ma Jin greeted her respectfully, prompting Yeonshin to follow suit. Yeonshin then turned his attention to the old man, the former Divine Sword Group captain and a purple robe martial master reputed to be stronger than Ma Jin. The old man addressed Yeonshin, identifying the boy as the lightning genius from the Radiant Demon Squad. He introduced himself as Ma Yeonjiak, mentioning his past leadership of the Divine Sword Group. Yeonjiak explained that he had informed the fortress master that his adopted grandson wished to meet a martial master of his caliber. Upon hearing this, Yeonshin realized that Ma Yeonjiak was unaware of his true identity, understanding that this ignorance was why the fortress master had summoned him. Yeonjiak continued, stating that he had recently heard of Yeonshin's fame and felt that the rumors did not fully capture his reputation upon meeting him in person. The old man further praised Yeonshin's accomplishments, expressing disbelief that Yeonshin had achieved so much at such a young age. In response, Yeonshin dismissed the compliments by addressing Ma Yeonjiak as his grandfather, revealing his identity as young Yeonshin of the Radiant Demon Squad. This unexpected revelation surprised Yeonjiak, as it was unusual for a young child to claim such a relationship. The adopted grandson appeared confused by Yeonshin's words, while a mischievous smile played on the fortress master's lips. It was then that Yeonjiak realized Yeonshin shared the surname Yeong, understanding that the child was his grandson from a daughter he had rejected. Additionally, Ma Jin was astonished to learn that Yeonshin was his sister's son, making Ma Jin Yeonshin's maternal uncle. The scene unveiled a complex family drama that fell and enjoyed by the fortress master. Yeonshin exhibited a dumbfounded expression upon discovering that Ma Jin, his squad captain, was also his uncle. Realizing the gravity of this revelation, Yeonshin offered an apology, explaining his uncertainty regarding the clan relations on his mother's side. He further mentioned that even members of his father's now-destroyed clan had largely given up on him. This confession led to another surprise in the room, the revelation that the Yeong Manor had been destroyed. Observing the others' reactions, Yeonshin understood that they were unaware of the Yeong Manor's fall. Yeonjiak felt a surge of pity for Yeonshin and requested permission from the fortress master to speak with him privately. The fortress master remained silent, prompting Yeonshin to step forward and declare that his mother was not a member of his grandfather's clan, leading him to feel that he did not belong there. He added that, as a warrior of the Desolate Fortress, he respected the old man's accomplishments but was uncomfortable engaging in further personal conversations. For the first time in this drama, the fortress master spoke, expressing her appreciation for Yeonshin's spirit. At that moment, the adopted grandson erupted in anger, unable to accept Yeonshin as his grandfather's direct descendant. He continued to rant, questioning how Yeonshin could show such disrespect to the former Divine Sword Group captain. completely forgetting that he was in the presence of the Desolate Fortress Master. Yeonshin responded by stating that he had no need for the adopted grandson's acknowledgement, asserting his identity as the Radiant Demon Squad's lightning genius rather than a member of the Ma clan. Smirking at these words, Yeonshin caused the adopted grandson to flush with anger. The grandson then sought his grandfather's permission to duel Yeonshin, aiming to prove that Yeonshin was unworthy of being the old man's blood relative. In response, Yeonshin revealed that agreeing to the fight was unnecessary. He added that if an exchange for learning was requested, he would gladly comply, emphasizing that he had no need to prove his value to the Ma clan. This saddened the old man for his earlier remarks while simultaneously angering his adopted son. Yeonshin noticed the iron gauntlet on his waist, realizing that the kid had mastered the Ma clan's Fist of Palm strikes. The Fortress Master then explained that Yeonjiak was an old-time friend who had journeyed with her for a long time, and the Lightning Genius was a promising subordinate. She expressed that any conflict between them would place her in a difficult position, so she preferred the matter be settled between martial artists, advising them to bet on what they desired from each other. Turning to Yeonshin, she acknowledged that the duel offered no benefit to him. Thus, as a friend to Yeonjiak, she declared that regardless of the duel's outcome, she would grant Yeonshin one request. Yeonshin responded cryptically, leading the Fortress Master to explain that granting the fruit of the Tree of Life was not possible at the moment. She added that even if Yeonjiak made such a request, it would yield the same result since he had already received a different reward for his contributions as the Divine Sword Group captain. Instead, she offered to teach Yeonshin one of her vital energy techniques. This offer intrigued Yeonshin and surprised the two martial masters present. The opportunity to learn from the Fortress Master, renowned as the strongest in the world, was significant. Observing the other kid, Yeonshin saw his excitement to learn martial arts rather than follow his grandfather's will if he won. Yeonshin was unwillingly accept the duel, disliking the idea that his mother's clan would endorse such a successor. Shortly after, they assembled in the arena exclusively designated for the Fortress Master to engage in battle. The Fortress Master informed them that the arena was theirs alone and they could do as they wished. Yeonshin maintained his usual aloof expression, appearing calm and confident as the kid prepared for the fight, his hand crackling and the iron gauntlet on his arm. Observing his grandfather and uncle, Yeonshin concluded that the Radiant Demon Squad was sufficient for him at the moment, eliminating the need for the Ma clan. Taking a deep breath to assess his opponent's potential benefits, Yeonshin raised his hand and twitched his finger, provoking the kid to continue, which further angered the child. The kid dashed forward, ready to unleash a powerful punch on Yeonshin. Yeonshin easily pushed the punch away, cleanly dodging the strike. Noticing the kid's superior energy, Yeonshin speculated that the child had consumed potent elixirs. Preparing to counter the next attack, Yeonshin activated his Yeong dynamic technique. The kid launched a barrage of punches, but Yeonshin either took a half step aside or deflected them to neutralize the assault. The kid's attacks varied between seemingly punching air and feeling as though striking a solid stone wall, causing him to wonder why Yeonshin hadn't drawn his sword. Yeonshin replied that the kid's fist strike techniques were sufficiently impressive. As the kid's anger intensified, he mustered more core energy and, releasing all his held-back power, charged again. This time, Yeonshin decided to meet the attack head-on. Despite having less energy, Yeonshin neutralized the initial technique and was only slightly pushed back. Demonstrating his movement technique, he floated and landed gracefully, resembling the movements of the noble races. The kid was astonished that his fist technique didn't even make Yeonshin break a sweat. Yeonjiak watched in awe as his grandson, whom he had once considered useless, proved to be highly capable. Meanwhile, Majin and the Fortress Master observed, having already anticipated Yeonshin's skill. True to his warrior name, Yeonshin exhaled a breath of relief, admitting he had only considered a strong fist strike technique. He then waved his hand to gather his core energy, announcing that by the count of 10, the fight would end. Yeonjiak recognized Yeonshin's talent, but believed ending the fight in 10 moves was unrealistic. Majin clarified that Yeonshin didn't intend to end it in 10 moves. Knowing his talent, Majin anticipated Yeonshin would create a new martial art and conclude the fight in 10 seconds. Meanwhile, the Fortress Master smiled contentedly, anticipating Yeonshin's capabilities. Conversely, The kid calmed down slightly, stating that within those 10 seconds, he would give his all. He gathered his core energy into his arm, radiating yellowish energy throughout his body. Yeonshin considered this positive, noting that the kid had calmed himself instead of getting overly excited by the initial confrontation. Additionally, Yeonshin sensed from the waves of core energy that the kid had been trained finely by his grandfather, a purple robe and a respected figure in the world. Yeonshin recognized the kid's technique well and suggested using a palm strike instead of a fist strike if preferred. He stated that he didn't need the kid's advice in return and encouraged the kid to simply do his best. These constructive words only fueled the kid's anger, prompting Yeonshin to add that the kid would be able to demonstrate plenty of skills in return. Gathering all his physical power into his step, the kid charged forward, channeling every bit of core energy into his fist. Yeonshin decided to meet the strike with his newly created fist strike, retracting his hand and performing an energy accumulation discharge. Their fists collided evenly, surprising the kid with the strength Yeonshin could exert despite Yeonshin having less core energy. Yeonshin didn't stop there. He used a rotational step to charge back toward the kid. With a single glance, Ma-jin realized that Yeonshin had accumulated more energy instead of depleting it. Utilizing this, Yeonshin executed another accumulated energy in his second strike, leaving the kid unable to prepare his fist strike in time. This strike broke the kid's defense, and a small smile appeared on Yeonshin's face, pleased with his new fist technique. Ma-jin was further surprised, noticing that Yeonshin had drawn inspiration for this second strike from the fusion fist strike. The kid understood that Yeonshin was growing stronger with each attack and glanced fearfully at his grandfather, worried about disappointing him. In the end, the kid gritted his teeth and gathered his energy into his arm once more. Observing this, Yeonshin praised the kid's abilities and asked him to show more, which only irritated the kid further. The kid decided to attack with a palm strike. Meeting the attack, Yeonshin employed his accumulated energy for a third strike, completely destroying the kid's palm technique and pushing him away. Not stopping there, Yeonshin used the palm strike he had observed moments before in a fourth move. A mischievous smirk appeared on his face as he turned the kid's own technique against him. The kid couldn't believe he was about to lose to someone like Yeonshin as Yeonshin performed his fourth strike. Yeonjiak was astonished at how the fight concluded within 10 seconds. The kid coughed and couldn't move after taking the strike to his chest. Yeonshin looked at him with indifferent eyes, now recognizing the truth firsthand. The lightning genius possessed real skills and talents to back his claims. Comparable to someone with a 300 IQ, Yeonshin had created, deciphered, and performed a martial art within a few moves they fought. Ma-jin was amazed to witness a fist art that grew stronger the longer the fight lasted, while Yeonjiak struggled to believe that his supposedly useless grandson had truly developed a new martial art so quickly. Meanwhile, Yeonshin was calmly normalizing his breathing, feeling proud of himself for creating a martial art worthy of being called a famed ultimate technique. Shortly after, the Fortress Master praised Yeonshin for the good fight and expressed her pleasure in seeing someone create a martial art. Yeonshin humbly admitted that he was embarrassed and hoped he hadn't wasted her time. She then inquired about the name of his new technique. Yeonshin chose to name it the Eternal Blossom Fist. The Fortress Master thought it was a perfect name for a fist strike technique that blooms endlessly. Ma-jin then turned to congratulate Yeonshin on his great work, acknowledging that he had created an incredible martial art. Despite the praise, Yeonshin felt somewhat unhappy, believing he had only managed to work out its framework and was unsatisfied with the moves. He mentioned that when using palm strikes, he relied entirely on the Radiant Demon Arts movement. Ma-jin explained that even with this reliance, not many white robes could withstand his attacks. He always tried not to be surprised, but Yeonshin's rapid growth was unavoidable. However, Yeonshin knew that his progress was not yet fast enough. This confused the others, but only the Fortress Master understood what he truly meant. Yeonjiak then approached him, seeking to know what he must do to gain Yeonshin's forgiveness. This surprised Ma-jin and the kid, as such an influential person was bowing his head to ask for forgiveness from a kid. Time and again, Yeonjiak prioritized his clan above everything else. At this moment, the purple robe martial master, known as the Absolute Being, lowered his head in reverence toward Yeonshin. His mere presence dictated life and death for most, earning him the status of a godlike figure. Yet, this display evoked a sense of irritation in Yeonshin. Eventually, Yeonshin expressed that seeing his grandfather in such a state was a heavy burden. He remarked that the past could not be undone and that the maternal side of his family felt like strangers to him. To Yeonshin, the Radiant Demon Squad was his true family. Yeonjiak, determined to win his grandson over, proposed building bonds over time. However, Yeonshin declared that he lacked time for anything beyond improving his martial arts. He then asserted that he had won the duel his grandson had recklessly initiated and demanded respect as a martial artist. The fortress master, noticing Yeonshin's predicament, intervened and suggested settling the matter. She offered to teach Yeonshin any martial arts he needed when the time came and allowed him to make a single request of the Ma family. Yeonshin, already prepared, planned to deliver his request through Ma Jin, his captain, at the appropriate moment. Ma Jin found himself irritated by this, as the boy seemed to reduce him to the role of a messenger. Once the matter was resolved, Yeonshin and Ma Jin returned to their barracks. On the way down the stairs, Ma Jin mentioned an upcoming mission that could benefit Yeonshin. A few days later, Ma Jin led a group of Radiant Squad members, including Yeonshin, Wonchong, Mirio, and Chung Myung, to Sien County. Yeonshin recalled Ma Jin's words about the mission, which involved recovering the Plum Blossom Pill, an elixir treasured by the Manhwa Sect. The sect had lost it, prompting a widespread search among various martial artists and groups. Their role was to assist the Manhwa Sect in this endeavor, while minimizing casualties. Yeonshin remarked that the conflict presented an opportunity to test his sword skills in real combat. Ma Jin explained that the mission would allow Yeonshin to face renowned martial artists, offering unparalleled growth through battle compared to mere solo training. As they journeyed, Wonchong complained about the requirement to remain out of uniform, a necessity to conceal their affiliation with the Desolate Fortress. Amused by Wonchang's antics, Ma Jin led the group onward. Eventually, they encountered martial artists from the Manhwa Sect. Sage Cheonju, leader of the Plum Blossom Swordsman and one of the top martial masters, greeted them. Yeonshin immediately recognized the name, recalling his status. To match this rank, Ma Jin, a black robe martial artist, had taken charge of their group. Cheonju, in turn, recognized Mirio as the Zen Demon Sword and Chung Myung as the Azure Eye Sword Demon. He knew who they were and felt no need for introductions, having already fought alongside them before. The revelation that Chung Myung's warrior name was Sword Demon intrigued Yeonshin. Among the Manhwa Sect's group, he noticed a particular young man. As Yeonshin surveyed the assembly, Cheonju suddenly approached and looked down upon him. Cheonju perceived the Desolate Fortress is serious about the mission for bringing a disciple. Yeonshin deduced that Cheonju must believe he was not a white robe martial artist, but rather the leader's disciple, based on his attire and his young appearance. Ma Jin attempted to explain, mentioning that Yeonshin was literally only 15 years old as a white robe, but he was cut off mid-sentence when Cheonju recognized Yeonshin's extraordinariness. Cheonju then suggested a friendly duel with the disciple of the Manhwa Sect leader. A small smile appeared on Ma Jin's face as he realized Cheonju was attempting to assert the Manhwa Sect's superiority over the Desolate Fortress. Since they were to travel as a party, it would be awkward for key members to fight each other. Thus, they preferred to use the future generation of their respective groups to determine the hierarchy. Ma Jin turned to Yeonshin for his response, but Yeonshin simply tapped the sword hanging at his waist, signaling his readiness to step forward. A sly smile crossed Ma Jin's face, anticipating an interesting encounter. The young man who was supposed to be Yeonshin's opponent grumbled about his master forcing him into the situation, believing that 5 moves would suffice. Cheonju reprimanded him briefly, explaining that he would learn something here and urging him to give his all. The young man dismissed the Radiant Demon Squad's martial arts, expressing doubt about what he could learn. Meanwhile, Yeonshin kept his mind open, pondering the depth of the Manhwa Sect's martial arts. He then remarked that the young man only needed 5 moves, prompting an apology from him, who claimed he did not intend to offend. Yu Hyun from the Manhwa Sect introduced himself, explaining that his rigorous training had led him to unwittingly voice his thoughts aloud. Wonchong was aware of the rumor that Yu Hyun was the Manhwa Sect leader's best disciple. Even Mirio added that he was considered the future of the Manhwa Sect, with rumors suggesting he had already begun learning the Violet Dawn's sacred art. Wonchong felt nervous about Yeonshin fighting such a formidable opponent, but remained hopeful that his comrades would manage. Excited, Yeonshin briefly introduced himself simply as Yeonshin with no mention of his title. As is customary when martial artists confront each other, they communicated through their martial arts. Yu Hyun employed the hidden fragrance drift of the Manhwa Sect, advancing toward Yeonshin with footwork resembling that of the noble races. He opened his palm, forming a pattern akin to a blooming flower. Yeonshin's interest was piqued as he wondered whether he could achieve the same variation by countering each of Yu Hyun's strikes. He then executed the first form of the Eternal Blossom Fist, Spiral, a martial art he had created. Yu Hyun's expression hardened with bewilderment as Yeonshin blocked every attack, yet some power remained to strike him. Yeonshin pressed forward, while Yu Hyun remained surprised by the strength behind his fists. With excitement evident on his face, Yeonshin stepped his feet firmly into the ground and performed the second form, Advancing Thunder, a point-blank straight punch that produced a thunderous sound from a single strike aimed at his opponent. In the nick of time, Yu Hyun utilized the Falling Blossom technique to defend against such a powerful attack. Observing this, Yeonshin was inspired to create his third form. He proposed extending the fight slightly longer, smiling with the intention of lasting about 10 seconds. Yeonshin continued to advance, his clenched fist imbued with internal energy. Cheonju appeared disappointed as he watched the Manhwa disciple being overpowered, while Ma Jin was pleased with the fight's progression. An ethereal wave of energy erupted from Yeonshin's left hand, blooming and bursting like a fireworks display of flowers, generating a powerful shock that struck Yu Hyun down. The force matched that of the second form, knocking Yu Hyun to the ground. The martial masters from the Manhwa sect were left confused. Should they be angered that their future was lost or pleased by the insight they had witnessed? Yeonshin felt satisfied with his performance of the move and decided to incorporate it as the third form of the Eternal Blossom Fist and named it the Blossoming Petal Fist. Silence enveloped the area as everyone pondered what had transpired. The future of such an ancient sect had been defeated by an unknown individual in just 3 moves. Realizing the potential embarrassment, Cheonju commanded his men to take Yu Hyun back. He then addressed Ma Jin, commenting that the Desolate Fortress had been raising a dragon and speculating on how much more they would cleanse Mirim in the future. Ma Jin responded that this was quite an exaggeration, explaining that the Desolate Fortress would not act unless ordinary people were harmed. Cheonju remarked that the convenient justification remained unchanged before turning his attention to Yeonshin. He praised Yeonshin, noting that he had witnessed some excellent martial arts today, resembling the Falling Blossom technique, though it was unlikely that the Manhwa sect's martial arts were connected to Yeonshin's. Cheonju admitted that he was unaware such martial arts existed, and even suggested that if Yeonshin ever left the Desolate Fortress, the Manhwa sect would welcome him. This surprised Ma Jin, who immediately told Cheonju to stop as he had crossed the line. Cheonju raised his hand to halt Ma Jin, admitting that his greed had overcome him, causing him to make a fool of himself. This was all because such remarkable talent was right before him. Despite this, Ma Jin was clearly irritated by Cheonju's words. Meanwhile, Mirio sent a sound transmission to Yeonshin, expressing that he was incredible and acknowledging that he was struggling. Yeonshin nodded slightly, as the third move he had performed had exhausted almost all of his internal energy. The Eternal Blossom Fist technique he had created delivered powerful attacks in every stance, but it also consumed a significant amount of internal energy. For the time being, he would have to use a sword in actual combat. After they hurriedly found a room at an inn, Chung Myung lazily instructed Yeonshin to open his middle dantian quickly, explaining that if his internal energy was insufficient, he would need to supplement his stamina. Yeonshin immediately sat and asked what that meant. Mirio joined in, explaining that the middle dantian had effects that even the upper dantian couldn't achieve, making his internal energy more solid. This was a new concept to Yeonshin, who had never learned such techniques in a sect. Mirio further explained that training the middle dantian improved efficiency, allowing martial artists to fight for extended periods without tiring. Masters who fought for days and nights without fatigue had trained their middle dantian, making the flow of internal energy more stable and enabling them to execute large techniques multiple times. Yeonshin glanced at his lazy senior, Chung Myung, who had fought with Namgung best swordsman, before turning to Mirio and asking how he could open his middle dantian. She informed him that with prolonged training in the lower dantian, it would open naturally, specifically by focusing on his breathing and energy circulation in his upper body. Appearing determined, Yeonshin asked if there was a faster way, addressing Mirio as sister. Mirio's cold eyes softened slightly, and her cheeks blushed. For a moment, her lips stuttered after being called sister, but she quickly regained her composure, like the experienced master she was, while Yeonshin wondered if he had said something wrong. The inn was alive with noise, the mingling smells of roasted meats and spiced broths thick in the air. Every corner seemed occupied, making it difficult to spot an empty seat amidst the bustling crowd. Wonchong squinted, his sharp eyes scanning the room, though it wasn't the crowd that held his attention for long. Mirio, seated across from him, suddenly stood, her movements sharp and deliberate. There was an edge to her presence now, as though a blade had been unsheathed within her. At the same time, Ma Jin leaned forward, his tone steady as he laid out the situation. He identified the stealthy demons, infamous thieves operating north of the Yangtze River, as the culprits behind their current predicament. By the time Mirio returned to her seat, her expression was unreadable, though her energy seemed no less intense. Ma Jin continued, addressing her directly as he closed his eyes, confirming that the stealthy demons were indeed the ones who had stolen her martial arts manual. To him, the connection was as clear as day. Wonchong turned toward her, his voice tinged with curiosity. He questioned whether they had stolen from a blue-robed warrior of the Desolate fortress, though his words seemed to prod more than accuse. Mirio grit her teeth, her frustration evident in the tautness of her jaw. She hinted at a story behind the theft, one she wasn't keen on sharing just yet. Ma Jin broke the silence with a decisive shift in the plan. He announced their intention to smash the signboards of Shangshi's unorthodox factions, targeting those aligned with the stealthy demons. Wonchong, ever analytical, asked what the Manhwa Sect planned to do during their assault. Ma Jin's response seemed to amuse him as he pieced together the strategy, realizing they would act as a distraction, drawing attention while the Manhwa Sect infiltrated the targeted sects. Yeonshin, the youngest among them, raised a practical concern. He questioned their justification for such a direct attack. Chung Myung, with a wry smile, turned to address him. His words carried a mix of explanation and dismissal as he clarified the Empire's stance. To the Empire, the distinction between orthodox and unorthodox martial artists was simple. It came down to whether money was donated willingly or extorted at swordpoint. Ma Jin added that unorthodox factions were parasites feeding off the nation. He explained the inevitability of their return even if wiped out, reinforcing that no justification was necessary to strike them. Yeonshin pressed on, asking how many factions they were targeting. Ma Jin replied with precision, designating 5 factions and volunteering to take on 2 himself. With quiet resolve, Yeonshin offered to handle a target alone. His voice carried the weight of confidence, though his words drew a measured warning from Ma Jin. He reminded the young warrior that seeking sole credit came with significant risks. Yeonshin remained steadfast, undeterred by the caution. His response was simple. This was something he needed to experience. Ma Jin hesitated. As Yeonshin's uncle, his instincts told him to intervene, but as the captain, he understood the importance of growth through trial. Closing his eyes briefly, he weighed the decision before finally agreeing. Putting his hand on the table, he outlined the allocation of their targets. Yeonshin was assigned the Mantis Sect in Lianhu County, Xi'an, a group known for their brutality, including the abduction of women. His gaze fixed on Yeonshin as he declared the mission. The young warrior was to wipe out the entire sect alone. The gravity of the task hung heavily in the air, though Yeonshin showed no sign of faltering under the weight of expectation. There was a certain image conjured when thinking of commoners who knew nothing of martial arts and lived simple, unremarkable lives. Mr. Jang, the escort accompanying Yeonshin, fit that image perfectly. His voice carried concern as he questioned the young martial artist. He urged Yeonshin to reconsider his decision, warning him about the Mantis Sect's notoriety and their strength. Despite the concern, Yeonshin walked ahead without a word, his resolve unshaken. Mr. Jang, undeterred, pressed on. He described the Mantis Sect's martial prowess, emphasizing that even a low-ranking member had once single-handedly wiped out the residents of Liangu Alley. Yeonshin paused briefly, his expression calm yet focused. There was no hesitation in his movements, only a desire for knowledge to better prepare for the mission. He inquired further about the sect, his voice steady, seeking any information that might aid him. Mr. Jeong explained that the Mantis sect had seized control of Liangu Street 3 years ago. Their crimes included abducting over a dozen people, using them as servants. He added that their atrocities were unchecked, with the local magistrate firmly in their pocket. As they walked, Yeonshin asked about their martial arts, curious to learn more. Mr. Jeong mentioned that the sect was known for using a variety of weapons, though few details about their skills were clear. Piecing together what he had learned, Yeonshin's thoughts sharpened. The Mantis sect had yet to fully develop a coherent martial system, but their members had acquired some level of skill. He questioned the state of those held captive and why the government had not intervened, only for Mr. Jeong to confirm that the magistrate's allegiance made outside help impossible. Arriving in Liangu County, Yeonshin observed the bustling streets. Although it was said to rival Shinya County, the area felt far more developed, straddling the line between a thriving city and a sprawling village. They entered a market street, but something unusual caught Yeonshin's attention. His gaze shifted toward an unsettling scene. Several women tied up as though they were criminals, their families weeping nearby, but too fearful to approach. 5 martial artists sat nearby, swords resting casually at their sides. Their careless demeanor contrasted sharply with the anguished cries of the families. Yeonshin approached deliberately, his voice cutting through the tense atmosphere as he questioned the scene before him. The sight of the great Ming dynasty's laws being so brazenly trampled sparked quiet anger within him. No response came from the men. Instead, one of them, a bald thug gripping a knife, smiled before hurling the blade through the air toward Yeonshin. It lacked any real power or skill, more a taunt than a threat. Without hesitation, Yeonshin caught the knife in his hand. With a single, fluid motion, he executed a delightful sword strike, releasing the blade with precision. The knife, propelled by the force of his attack, shot forward like a flash of light, piercing through the air. The bald thug dropped instantly, the blade embedded in his head, and he dropped lifeless as though nailed to the ground. The remaining 4, momentarily stunned, quickly rose, their gazes hardening as they drew their weapons. One mocked Yeonshin, questioning where such a young fighter had learned martial arts and ridiculing his dagger stance. Another advanced, commenting on Yeonshin's speed and skill, his sword drawn in challenge. Yeonshin remained silent, watching them calmly, as though their words weren't worth answering. Then, without fanfare, he drew his Desolate sword. The polished white blade gleamed under the sunlight, its immaculate condition a testament to its care. When one of the men commented on the weapon, his tone shifted, filled with greed as he suggested offering it to their sect leader. The words had barely left his mouth when Yeonshin's blade moved. Its dazzling trajectory cut through the air, leaving a burst of blood in its wake. The man's head split cleanly, the blade continuing down through his torso before his lifeless body collapsed. The remaining men began to understand that this young swordsman was no ordinary martial artist. Before the 3 could even turn to face him, the path of the white sword blazed in swift arcs. Demon's Light, a technique of the swift sword, cut through the air with deadly precision. The sensation of 3 consecutive strikes traveled up Yeonshin's arm as his sword wave landed perfectly. Their bodies had no time to react. By the time they might have moved, their upper torsos were already severed cleanly from their lower halves. The lifeless forms collapsed to the ground, one after another. Yeonshin turned his focus to the bound women, his movements fluid and efficient as he cut through the ropes that held them captive. Gratitude filled the air as the freed women lowered themselves into deep bows. Families rushed forward, sobbing as they embraced their loved ones. Mothers, wives, and daughters finally returned to their arms. Yeonshin, however, found no satisfaction in the scene. His focus remained sharp as he turned to Mr. Jeong, his question cutting through the reunion. Mr. Jeong responded quickly, pointing toward the end of the road. The crowd, still reeling from the chaos, retreated into the shadows, ensuring they remained out of sight. Only Mr. Jeong stayed behind, silently following Yeonshin as they made their way to the Mantis sect. The entrance gate of the sect loomed ahead, its signboard boldly marking the territory. Without hesitation, Yeonshin stopped briefly in front of the gate, raising his leg and channeling inner energy through the Jeong dynamic technique. The power gathered in his strike surged, and with one explosive motion, he released it. The gate shattered instantly, fragments of wood and metal scattering across the ground. Stepping through the destruction, Yeonshin entered the training hall. Around 30 martial artists stood in formation, weapons drawn, their gazes fixed on the intruder who had already taken down 5 of their own. Yeonshin's expression remained calm, indifferent to the sight before him. Observing their readiness, he noted how quickly the news of his arrival must have traveled. The speed of their organization spoke volumes, though it did little to faze him. With his sword drawn, Yeonshin stepped into the center of the yard. He was surrounded by martial artists who remained motionless, their gazes locked onto him with murderous intent, as though biding their time to strike. Tales often spoke of unrivaled supreme masters who could vanquish armies single-handedly. A middle-aged man standing alone on the stairs leading to the main yard frowned deeply, seemingly incredulous. The young intruder had supposedly killed their disciples, a claim that hung heavy in the air. Yeonshin's eyes moved to the man's attire, a long robe adorned with intricate depictions of spiritual creatures, including the 4 divine beasts and dragons. Such clothing was a bold statement, one reserved exclusively for the emperor. The thought crossed Yeonshin's mind. Was this man a rebel for daring to don the dragon robe? Descending the stairs with measured steps, the man who appeared to be the sect leader ordered the others not to interfere. He remarked with a trace of eagerness that it had been a long time since he had felt the edge of a blade, unsheathing his sword as he spoke. He addressed Yeonshin with disdain, questioning why the young man had chosen to reveal himself before their sect, even if he fancied himself a hero. In an indifferent tone, Yeonshin countered by asking for the man's name. The question prompted a mocking reply. Someone about to die, the sect leader declared, had no need to know his great name. Yeonshin, maintaining his composure, explained that he needed the name of the sect leader to claim credit for his merit. As he spoke in a low voice, he began channeling energy with the Jeong dynamic technique throughout his muscles. At that moment, he merged his essence with the Desolate sword, his true energy heightening his awareness, and felt the sect leader's sword intent. The praying Mantis sect leader charged, wielding his sword with a ferocity that rode the wind. Yeonshin observed intently, recognizing the swift sword movement the man employed, an advanced technique Yeonshin himself had mastered. Having created a fist technique that properly handled force, the path of the sword was clearly visible in Yeonshin's eyes. He silently wondered if his own growth had brought this clarity. Recalling the way Chung Myung had deflected his sword strike during training, Yeonshin unsheathed his weapon, swinging upward to intercept the sect leader's attack. The motion appeared serene, but it carried the layered power of the energy accumulation discharge technique. The force of repelling the strike felt vivid, and the sect leader's expression shifted to one of perplexity. Realizing the youth before him was no ordinary opponent, the sect leader barked an order to his disciples. The surrounding members of the praying Mantis sect surged forward, weapons aimed at the seemingly fragile young man. Yeonshin held his ground, watching as blades descended from all directions. The sharpness of their attacks cut through the air, awakening every fiber of his being. For the first time, he faced such an overwhelming number of weapons simultaneously. The first strike reached him, but he sidestepped with a half-step, evading the blow before launching a counterstrike with his sword. Another attack followed, and Yeonshin raised his blade to defend. One strike after another came his way, the sheer volume of attacks demanding his full attention. The onslaught was relentless, a cascade of strikes forcing him to move fluidly between defense and counterattack. Each enemy that came within reach met the edge of his blade. The chaotic lines formed by the flurry of blades became visible in Yeonshin's mind. Paths carved through the melee emerged with clarity, guiding his movements. His body, attuned to the wind, danced between the strikes, each motion calculated. With the Desolate sword in hand, he struck through gaps in the assault, weaving through the chaos to deliver fatal blows. The layered energy of the attacker's weapons refined Yeonshin's swift sword technique, which now merged seamlessly with his Desolate sword. His strikes, precise and devastating, followed trajectories only he could perceive. His sword danced brilliantly, his blade leaving death in its wake. Before long, Yeonshin found himself standing before the sect leader once more. Yeonshin observed the man standing before him, with the lifeless bodies of the disciples he had slain scattered behind him. The sect leader muttered in surprise, questioning the situation. According to the teachings of his seniors, one must take the initiative in a group battle. Yeonshin reflected internally. True energy surged through his body like wildfire, racing through the 3 main meridians in an instant. His sword-wielding hand tightened, channeling his force as though it were a fist. The power of the eternal blossom fist gathered in his arm, culminating in the execution of its second form, the advancing thunder. Though armed with a sword, Yeonshin infused his strikes with the essence of the fist technique. Mastering the rhythm of the Desolate sword wave, he moved with precision. A fierce wind accompanied his charge, closing the distance between him and the sect leader in mere moments. The man's face, etched with surprise, loomed closer in Yeonshin's sight. With swift resolve, Yeonshin struck downward, his blade aimed for the sect leader's head. Before the sect leader could utter a word, a pure flash of sword light cut through the air. The merciless strike sent a shuddering sensation reverberating through the battlefield. When the dust settled, the lifeless body of the Mantis sect leader lay silent. The overwhelming force of Yeonshin's strike had left unmistakable evidence of its power. The heavy scent of blood rising in the air made the surreal scene all too real. Declaring his resolve, Yeonshin proclaimed his intent to destroy the signboard of the praying Mantis sect. He turned his gaze toward the remaining disciples, who stared in disbelief. One disciple murmured a question, his voice trembling. Another exclaimed in sheer disbelief, calling out in desperation. Amid the chaos, a disciple clad in a purple robe screamed, his voice ringing with urgency, "Which is to summon the blood sword?" Yeonshin paused, contemplating the mention of the blood sword. He inquired calmly, yet firmly, whether they were referring to the Blood Master Swordsman and if the Blood Flame cult was supporting them. The 2 disciples halted, surprised by his question. In the next instant, Yeonshin grabbed one of the disciples by the neck, his strength enhanced by the Jung dynamic technique. Forcing the man to his knees, he commanded him to speak. The disciple stammered, admitting that the Blood Master Swordsman was resting in the annex nearby. Yeonshin considered the situation. If it was truly the Blood Master Swordsman, there was no way such a formidable figure would fail to sense the intensity of this battle. A sudden attack disrupted his thoughts. A sword imbued with core energy hurtled toward him silently, slicing through the air without warning. Yeonshin's Desolate sword, strengthened by layers of true energy coursing through his right arm, intercepted the strike with a resonant clang. The vibrations spreading through his hand were sharper and more intense than anything encountered thus far in the praying Mantis sect. A figure leaped past Yeonshin, retrieving the fallen weapon. The sunlight glinted off the reddish hair of the newcomer, who exuded an ominous energy that seemed to permeate the battlefield. With a voice laced with disdain, the Blood Master Swordsman remarked that Yeonshin had blocked the strike. The carnage surrounding them, he observed, could only be the young swordsman's doing. Unperturbed, Yeonshin responded calmly, noting that carnage was a word ill-suited for someone like the Blood Master Swordsman. His thoughts solidified. This was indeed the Blood Master Swordsman of the Blood Flame cult. The man before him had hair streaked with red and black, his mouth stained with dried blood. Wielding an iron sword that radiated ominous energy, the Blood Master Swordsman exuded a malevolence that filled the air, setting the stage for an inevitable clash. Ma Jin's earlier remark surfaced unbidden in Yeonshin's mind, a memory from a conversation about Yeonshin's recent feats. Ma Jin had joked that slaying 5 Bloodsword Masters would earn recognition as a blue warrior, regardless of age. The humor in his tone had been evident, given how rare it was to encounter the Blood Flame sect, let alone defeat its members. Yeonshin's thoughts lingered only briefly before he muttered a single word to himself. Lucky. Then, with an air of cold resolve, he added that only 3 remained. Across from him, his opponent made no response. In the past, such an adversary might have recklessly charged forward, heedless of the warning in Yeonshin's tone. But now, things had shifted. Wariness marked every movement of the Swordsmaster, whose cautious sidestep betrayed a deep recognition of the danger before him. This opponent was no novice. Unlike the members of the praying Mantis sect, the Swordsmaster had sensed the full extent of Yeonshin's power. But Yeonshin had no intention of waiting for an attack. With precision, his foot struck the ground, sending a surge of energy rippling through his body. The second step he took carried intent, a deliberate act that resonated with power. The distance between them vanished as Yeonshin unleashed the Radiant Demon's swift sword technique. The blade carved a sharp trajectory through the air, colliding with his opponent's weapon. The impact echoed as steel clashed with steel, the force of Yeonshin's strike driving his foe backward. Though the enemy had managed to block the attack, the momentum had shifted unmistakably in Yeonshin's favor. This fight needed to end quickly. The Swordsmaster was formidable, but prolonging the battle in the heart of the praying Mantis sect would diminish Yeonshin's chances of survival. His piercing sky-blue eyes swept over the swordsman's form, analyzing every subtle movement with a clarity honed by countless battles. As his opponent retreated, Yeonshin sensed the gathering energy in the man's left hand, an unmistakable sign of an impending counterstrike. The opening revealed itself. Instinct guided Yeonshin's body, bypassing thought as he acted. Energy coiled around the Desolate sword, channeling the spiral force of the Eternal Blossom Fist into his next strike. The combination of precision and speed compressed the space between them as Yeonshin surged forward. The strike was swift and efficient. Blood sprayed faintly into the air, carried by a gentle breeze. The Swordsmaster staggered, a choke sound escaping his lips as shock and disbelief etched themselves onto his face. Yeonshin felt the anguish and lingering resentment in the vibrations that ran along his blade. Even as the Swordsmaster's lips began to move, forming what would have been his final words, Yeonshin did not falter. There was no time for parting sentiments. With a sharp twist of the embedded blade, he ended it. The lifeless body crumpled to the ground, silent and unceremonious, like a flame snuffed out by the wind. He addressed the remaining members of the praying Mantis sect, his voice low and steady. Don't flee. The words froze them in place. Though devoid of overt menace, the authority in his tone was undeniable. None dared defy it. As Yeonshin prepared to depart, the weight of the sack strapped to his back was a reminder of his completed task. The villagers gathered around as he prepared to leave. Among them, Mr. Jang, his face streaked with tears, approached to express his gratitude. His voice trembled as he thanked Yeonshin for giving his daughter peace and lifting the burden of his resentment. Yeonshin's voice was barely above a murmur as he replied, a trace of frustration in his tone. Xian should belong to Jeong. Mr. Jang stirred at the statement, his grief-stricken face showing a flicker of awareness. He replied hesitantly, mentioning the ongoing conflict between the Jeong sect and the Tyrant Sword sect. The words unsettled Yeonshin. Jeong at war with the Tyrant Sword sect? The notion was unfamiliar, and it raised unsettling questions. Fragments of memory surfaced. Visions of his family's annihilation and the enigmatic presence of the Tyrant Sword sect leader. The timing of these events, and the Jeong sect's involvement, had always felt unnatural. As he processed the implications, his thoughts drifted to his niece, little Haya, and to his second brother, Yeongsan. He clung to the hope that they were safe for now. Yeonshin resolved that he needed to go to Jeong. The decision aligned with Ma Jin's expected approval. Within the chaotic martial world dominated by the 13 heavens, Desolate Fortress's intervention would inevitably target these supreme forces of evil. The beheading of Tyrant Sword sect masters was not just a reprisal, but a means of securing noteworthy achievements. As he reached the summit, Yeonshin abruptly halted. A question lingered in the air as he turned toward the rustling bushes nearby. Had there been any sign of stealthy demon? His voice carried the weight of authority, prompting 2 figures to emerge from the shadows. The first was a swordsman radiating an intense and sharp aura. The second was a young Taoist with an extraordinary presence. They were Cheonju, the Sword Saint of Manhwa, and Yeonhin, a direct disciple of Manhwa's sect leader. Approaching with measured steps, they addressed Yeonshin. Cheonju acknowledged that the praying Mantis sect was likely not involved. Having witnessed the devastation of an entire sect, his demeanor now carried a distinct reverence. He no longer saw Yeonshin as a promising peer, but as a true martial artist of Desolate Fortress. Yeonshin responded with a calm nod, expressing mild disappointment at the lack of new leads. Cheonju then praised Yeonshin's martial prowess, likening him to the future leader of Radiant Demon Squad or even the Divine Sword Group leader. His admiration seemed genuine, while Yeonhin, with a thoughtful gaze, interjected that this encounter marked his first defeat. He elaborated that sparring with Yeonshin had been an unparalleled experience. Among his peers, none had posed such a challenge. When Yeonshin inquired about the lack of similarly skilled disciples within Manhwa, Yeonhin admitted there were none of his age within the sect leader's lineage. His suggestion of forming a friendship was met with a curt, yet not entirely dismissive reply. Yeonshin had no intention of visiting Manhwa, but left the door open for Yeonhin to seek him out, on the condition that he performed new martial techniques each time. Flustered but encouraged, Yeonhin brightened at this prospect. Upon arriving at the inn where they had first stayed, their camaraderie reached a temporary pause. Yeonshin ascended to Ma Jin's room, where he was greeted with an astute observation. Chung Myung noted the subtle changes in Yeonshin's energy, while Mirio immediately instructed him to apply some medicine to treat the lingering injuries. Ma Jin's voice pierced the tense air, edged with curiosity and a growing sense of unease. He questioned the progress of the mission. Without a word, Yeonshin loosened the ties and let its contents spill onto the table. Gasps rippled through the gathered, their faces filled with shock. Lying before them was the severed head of the Blood Swordsmaster, accompanied by the shattered remnants of the praying Mantis Sect's signboard. This was no mere stroke of luck. The incident in Jinping County had not been an isolated fluke. He reached out to Yeonshin, ruffling the boy's hair in a rare gesture of approval. Ma Jin muttered. The mention of involvement from the Blood Flame Sect tightened his expression, the scars on his face seeming to deepen as tension gripped him. The implications were grim, and the weight of what had unfolded settled heavily on his shoulders. This proves your worth, he stated plainly, his voice steady and unwavering, acknowledging the boy's accomplishment without unnecessary embellishment. Ma Jin's unease evident in his furrowed brow. Blood Swordmasters aren't this common, he murmured, his voice heavy with concern. Standing nearby, Mirio nodded slightly in agreement. This was far from ordinary, and her calm acknowledgement only served to highlight the magnitude of what they faced. Ma Jin's tone shifted, adopting the authority of a seasoned leader. Lightning Genius has accomplished something that cannot be overlooked, he declared. Incidents seem to follow wherever he goes. Yet to handle them so decisively and bring back information of this significance will leave its mark on the martial arts world. The Desolate Fortress will have no choice but to respond to this. Breaking the silence that followed, Yeonshin stepped forward, his voice steady and resolute, belying the tension surrounding him. There is something he needs to report, he announced, his tone firm, without a hint of hesitation. After a pause, he continued, his gaze unwavering and his expression unflinching. He wants to go to Jeonnan's sect. Ma Jin hesitated for a moment, staring blankly before finally speaking again. He asked if Yeonshin truly intended to go to Mount Jeonnan. Yeonshin, with a firm tone, expressed concern for his niece's well-being, prompting Ma Jin's expression to stiffen awkwardly. Ma Jin acknowledged the situation, explaining that they had only just received the news themselves. Mirio interjected, raising her eyes slightly as if troubled. She cautioned that Mount Jeonnan was now an incredibly dangerous place. The Tyrant Sword Sect, she explained, differed significantly from the Blood Flame Sect. While they couldn't simply be labeled as evil, their approach to martial arts was extreme, an unsettling blend of orthodox techniques and sinister practices. They were obsessed with strength, unable to recognize moderation. Her tone reflected a clear concern for Yeonshin, the youngest among them. Ma Jin agreed, emphasizing that no mission had been assigned. Completing the tasks they had already been given should be sufficient, he reasoned. Both Ma Jin and Mirio clearly opposed sending Yeonshin on such a perilous endeavor. Only Chung Myung, seemingly oblivious to the tension, stepped forward to defend the youngest member of the Desolate Fortress. He argued that a squad leader should have the authority to judge a situation and assign a mission at their discretion. His words, though earnest, earned him a sharp glare from Mirio, who clearly disapproved of his interference. Ma Jin spoke candidly, voicing his reservations. He questioned how they could send Yeonshin when the likelihood of his return from Mount Jeongnan was uncertain. The gravity of the situation was apparent to everyone except Yeonshin, who seemed taken aback and could only manage a brief response of surprise. Ma Jin clarified further, explaining that anyone in Desolate Fortress who knew of Yeonshin's talents would share their concern. Chung Myung explained that Yeonshin's talent made him a coveted figure in the martial world. Even the Manhwa Sect's Sword Saint had brazenly expressed interest in having Yeonshin as a guest. Mirio and Wonchong nodded in agreement, their expressions confirming their silent support of Ma Jin's sentiments. However, Yeonshin appeared to perceive a deeper, unspoken reason behind Ma Jin's reluctance. Addressing the squad leader with a calm yet piercing tone, Yeonshin asked how Ma Jin could fail to distinguish between public duties and private matters. His words struck a nerve, delivering a clear and undeniable point. Yeonshin then asserted that his achievements spoke for themselves and urged Ma Jin to record this request as an individual merit. To emphasize his resolve, he pointed to the head of the Blood Swordsmaster, displayed on the table as a testament to his capabilities. Chung Myung, unable to suppress his smugness, remarked that Ma Jin had been cornered. His comment earned him a sharp elbow from Mirio, who silenced him with an exasperated expression and made him groaning in pain. After a moment of deep thought, Ma Jin finally spoke. He admitted that it was difficult to refuse and proposed a solution, a bet. The suggestion surprised the group. Ma Jin, a black-robed martial master, was a figure of immense strength, an insurmountable force compared to a white-robed martial artist like Yeonshin, who was little more than an ant in comparison. Ma Jin declared that Yeonshin would need to neutralize or avoid just one move within a single second. If Yeonshin could manage that, Ma Jin promised to grant his request and even offered an additional reward. This, Ma Jin explained, was the minimum level of skill required to stand out in the martial world. Mirio, fond of Yeonshin, attempted to protest, but her words fell on deaf ears. Yeonshin, unwavering in his determination, nodded without hesitation. They moved to the inn's backyard. Neither Yeonshin nor Ma Jin paid any attention to the growing interest of others. Masters from the Manhwa Sect, having overheard the situation, approached the scene. Ma Jin, unfazed, casually permitted them to observe. Among them, Cheonju returned to his group, thanking Ma Jin for allowing them to witness the exchange. He reminded the Manhwa disciples that this was a rare opportunity to witness the techniques of a Desolate Fortress squad leader. Yu Hyun, one of the disciples, voiced his thoughts aloud, marveling at the fact that a black-robed master of the Desolate Fortress, like Ma Jin, was comparable to a peerless swordsman. Cheonju remarked on the situation, acknowledging that especially in chaotic battles, they were those stronger than himself. Among them, Hellslayer stood out as a figure who completely dominated the battlefield. Known for eliminating countless hypocritical villains, including renowned sect leaders, his movements were not to be underestimated. Even a single strike from such a master carried the essence of instant death. Cheonju provided an extensive explanation of Ma Jin's background as a black-robed martial master and squad leader of the Desolate Fortress. He elaborated that unlike the martial artists of the Nine Sects, who pursued the ultimate form of swordsmanship, Ma Jin's techniques were honed entirely for practical combat. Yu Hyun, observing the unfolding scene, exclaimed that no matter how much one trained, it seemed impossible to withstand even a single move from such a master. His gaze shifted to the boy standing across from Ma Jin, the Radiant Demon Squad's lightning genius, Yeonshin, who stood calmly, with one hand resting lightly on his sword, facing the gusting wind. Yeonshin asked for some time to prepare, to which Ma Jin agreed, telling him to take as much time as needed. He warned Yeonshin that the strike he would deliver would be impossible for any white-robed martial artist to handle and advised him to sharpen his senses properly. Though his words sounded casual, Ma Jin's standards were anything but. As a black-robed supreme martial master and leader of one of the divine sword squads, he was one of fewer than 30 such figures in the Desolate Fortress. Yeonshin closed his eyes to compose himself, calming his mind and steeling his resolve. He reminded himself that he simply needed to demonstrate the martial arts he had learned. Starting by focusing inward, he awakened his lower dantian and the dormant energy within his body. This energy flowed through him, even reaching his pupils, sharpening his senses further. It was the very skill he had refined during his battle with the praying Mantis Sect's leader. Muttering softly to himself, Yeonshin analyzed Ma Jin's body, scanning it from every angle, as if viewing it reflected in a mirror. His heightened sensitivity to energy allowed him to perceive even the subtlest movements with extraordinary clarity. Conceding the first move, he made a rare joke, which brought a brief smile to Ma Jin's face. As the wind stirred, Ma Jin raised his hand, showcasing the epitome of the radiant demon art. A master of all weapons, Ma Jin's skill was legendary. Stories were told of how he turned even discarded weapons on battlefields into tools of destruction, but his bare hands were considered the deadliest of all. Yeonshin was fully aware that Ma Jin's palm technique could shatter a fortress wall with a single strike. Quietly, he told himself he had to evade it, lowering the hand resting on his sword in preparation. Ma Jin took a step forward, his movements precise, direct, and astoundingly fast. The force of his strike felt like a condensed typhoon rushing forward. Even though it wasn't at full speed, Yeonshin found himself overwhelmed, even to just twist his body aside. Ma Jin's hand, controlled yet devastatingly powerful, sliced through the air with precision. The trajectory of the strike was aimed directly at Yeonshin's head. In that instant, a faint blue light flickered across Yeonshin's forehead. He realized that his current footwork was insufficient to escape. The techniques taught by Jeong Clan lacked the structured formulas he needed, leaving him to rely on clear intention and instinct to carve a path. Yeonshin muttered about needing just one step. In his mind, he calculated the movement path and the direction of force Ma Jin's technique would create, drawing complex lines in his thoughts. His head burned with intense focus as a second dantian near his heart seemed to awaken momentarily. Harnessing this new surge of internal energy, Yeonshin felt a technique forming within him, born of his innate talent and the immense pressure of the situation. Under Ma Jin's overwhelming mastery, Yeonshin took a single step. In that fleeting moment, a tremendous shockwave erupted behind him, whipping his hair upward. The fierce wind from Ma Jin's strike swirled the dust around the yard, leaving the onlookers in stunned silence. Among them were masters who had dedicated their lives to martial arts, and even they recognized that Yeonshin's step was extraordinary. Ma Jin, still in the posture of extending his hand, moved only his lips to ask what that footwork had been. Yeonshin replied simply, saying he had walked because he saw a path to survival. Indifferently, he added that he would name it the Radiant Wing Step. Ma Jin stood silently for a moment, a brief smile crossing his face as he thought to himself about the incomprehensible talent Yeonshin had just demonstrated. Straightening his posture, Ma Jin made his decision. He announced his permission for Yeonshin to journey to Mount Jeongnan, acknowledging the boy's capabilities with a tone of quiet respect. Soon after the sun rose, the two young martial artists from the Desolate Fortress made their way towards Jeongnan Mountain. Yeonshin wore a blue robe with a white robe beneath it, walking closely behind Wonchong. In the Jeongnan sect, being a white-robed warrior alone would not be enough to act independently. Jeong Clan had jokingly remarked while helping his youngest junior borrow and wear the robe. Yeonshin, puzzled by the remark, wondered about its meaning, feeling a sense of curiosity rising within him. Mirio spoke to clarify. A white-robed martial artist with a blue Desolate sect long robe meant that the person was acknowledged as a blue-robed warrior of Desolate Fortress, a title that guaranteed one's status as a rising star within the sect. The title of Rising Star was not given lightly in Desolate Fortress. It indicated the best among the juniors following the martial path. The significance was amplified by the fact that it was awarded less than half a year after entering Desolate Sect, a rare and honorable achievement. Mirio smiled, her expression captivating and selfless. She explained that the title came with the authority to command all white-robed warriors within Desolate Sect. Jeong Clan added that if anyone asked, Yeonshin could mention the azurized demon sword from the Radiant Demon Squad acknowledging him, which would likely prevent most disputes. Mirio also suggested using her own warrior name, Zen Demon Sword, as a gesture of handing over the blue robe, a gesture of her joining the small ceremony. Yeonshin thanked them awkwardly, though they seemed pleased with and proud. As they continued on the road, he felt an unfamiliar sensation in his chest, the kindness of his senior overwhelming him in a way he had not experienced before. The words they spoke were more than mere gestures. They carried the weight of responsibility and recognition. Wonchong turned back slightly, his tone teasing but tinged with envy, complimenting Yeonshin on the way the white robe and long blue robe suited him. Yeonshin couldn't help but speak his thoughts aloud as he felt the weight of the blue robe, as if contemplating the significance of the situation. Wonchong commented that a young hero like Yeonshin would be quick to adapt, his tone light, but carrying a subtle admiration. Yeonshin, though moved by the compliment, felt a deep gratitude toward Wonchong for accompanying him on his journey, a companion who had stood by him through thick and thin. Before long, the two arrived at the entrance to Jeongnan Mountain. From a distance, they had been struck by the steep and solemn terrain. But up close, the entrance revealed the strict nature of the martial arts sect, with martial artists standing guard, their vigilance unmistakable. Wonchong noted the martial artists seemed to be from Jeongnan, wondering if the conflict with the Tyrant Sword sect was real, as they had come to the foot of the mountain rather than the main gate. The air was thick with tension, and the sense of anticipation only grew stronger with each step they took. As the two approached, two of the four guards stepped forward and asked for their sect, names, and purpose. Wonchong casually replied, identifying them as from Desolate Sect, subtly signaling Yeonshin to take responsibility as a Desolate Fortress rising star, though his tone remained light. Yeonshin stepped forward, introducing himself as Yeonshin of the Radiant Demon Squad, and Wonchong followed with his own introduction, emphasizing the point that they were indeed representatives of the prestigious Desolate Fortress. The guards scrutinized their clothing carefully before questioning if they intended to prove their identity with mere garments. Wonchong then produced jade identity tokens from his robe, a subtle but definitive display of their affiliation. One of the guards mocked them, questioning whether young martial artists like them would act independently, and who would believe such claims. A sharp-tongued disciple was about to retort, but was silenced by a senior martial artist who had witnessed the unfolding situation. The senior guard spoke with authority, explaining that due to the current wartime situation, they could not easily trust unfamiliar identities, though his tone seemed more mocking than reasonable. The tension in the air grew palpable as Yeonshin and Wonchong stood before the gate. Wonchong, clearly frustrated, muttered under his breath as he raised his inner energy. The slight wave of energy spread quickly, an unmistakable display of his true power. Having passed the Desolate exam and become a Radiant Demon Squad, white-robed martial artist, he was no longer the carefree figure he appeared to be. The energy he emanated now carried the weight of his strength. The guards finally recognized the power of Desolate Fortress in Wonchang's display of inner energy. One of the guards, outraged by the display, screamed at them, pointing a finger in accusation. However, Wonchong, now exasperated, demanded to know what was meant by such nonsense, his patience at an end. Yeonshin silently reflected on the situation. The fight with the Tyrant Sword sect clearly wasn't going well. The pride of the Nine sect seemed to be cracking, and the arrival of these young martial artists, confident and certain of their place, was enough to shake the foundations of the old guard. These young warriors, who had stepped forward boldly to claim their role, were a sign that things were changing in the martial world. The guard could hardly believe what he was witnessing. He spoke with incredulity, remarking that young martial artists like them were acting as if they were from the Desolate Fortress, and at such a time as this. His tone grew more resolute, a sense of frustration blocking his chest. Another elaborated that even if they were truly from Desolate Fortress, it would still be a problem if the two young martial artists who merely claimed to be from Desolate Fortress being sent to the Grey Jeongnan. The reputation of the once prestigious Desolate Fortress seemed to be a thing of the past. The guard's tone became increasingly sarcastic as he spoke, and the sharpness in his eyes suggested he wasn't simply voicing an opinion, but issuing a challenge. Yeonshin felt the weight of the insult and reached for the handle of his sword, his fingers grazing it. He calmly spoke, his voice steady despite the rising tension. He reminded the guard that insulting martial artists from another force without reason was unbecoming. The inner energy that had been quietly simmering inside him flared, making his presence even more imposing. The Jeongnan disciples, caught off guard by Yeonshin's swift and overwhelming aura, began to grit their teeth and reach for their swords. One of them, angered by Yeonshin's words and actions, shouted, demanding to know if he intended to intimidate them. In an instant, Yeonshin unsheathed his sword with a swift motion, sending a burst of force toward the guard in the back. The aura of his sword strike was powerful enough to knock the guard's sword from his grip, sending it flying through the air. It had all happened in a fraction of a second, leaving the guard speechless and stunned. Wonchong observed the scene with a calm demeanor, fully aware that if Yeonshin chose to, the guards would be unable to do anything to stop him. Yeonshin sheathed his sword, his eyes betraying no emotion, as if to silently convey that he would mercilessly slay them should they dare disrespect the desolate fortress again. Before any further action could be taken, a voice rang out, clear and authoritative, causing the very bushes to tremble. An immense wave of inner energy filled the air. The presence of the figure who had spoken was overwhelming, as though she were a celestial being descending to the mortal world. Yeonshin immediately recognized the significance of this presence. It was a transcendence of martial power, something beyond the realm of ordinary martial artists. The woman standing before them exuded an aura of superiority, her delicate body surrounded by an energy that seemed to defy her seemingly frail physique. Her extraordinary skills were apparent even without her lifting a finger. One of the guards shouted, recognizing the woman. Yeonshin assessed her quietly, noting that she seemed to possess the same level of power as a blue-robed warrior from Desolate Fortress. The woman's commanding voice filled the air once more, cutting through the tension. She chastised the guards, calling their actions unbefitting of Jeong disciples, and suggested they return and discuss the matter further. The guards, ashamed, immediately apologized, their faces reddened with embarrassment. They muttered that they were deeply ashamed to face such a senior, their spirits clearly deflated. With a slight pause, the woman spoke again, this time directing her words to Yeonshin and Wonchong. She expressed her shame at the way the Jeong disciples had behaved in front of the honored guests from Desolate Fortress. Wonchong appeared completely overwhelmed by the woman's presence, though it was unclear whether he was more taken aback by her beauty or the sheer magnitude of her power. Yeonshin, ever composed, introduced himself first. He calmly stated that he was Yeonshin of the Radiant Demon Squad, and that his companion, Wonchong, was also a member of the same squad. The woman, her soft voice carrying an unspoken weight, revealed her own identity. She was Weiji Maiwa of the Jeong Sect. Wonchong immediately recognized the name. Feeling a sense of awe, Wonchang's exclamation confirmed the significance of her identity. Weiji Maiwa, the Cloud Sword Dragon of Jeong Sect. Her name carried immense prestige, a warrior title associated with the strength and ferocity of a dragon. Despite her transcendent beauty, Yeonshin found his interest piqued not by her appearance, but by the strength she clearly possessed. She was a force to be reckoned with, and that was what mattered most to him. On top of that, she bared to the position of an elder at a young age of 20.